We're called to order the Tuesday, June 24th, regular meeting of the Dayton City Council. Stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I need a motion and a second for the agenda.
Motion.
Need a second.
I'll second.
Okay, changes.
Yep, one item, Mr. Mayor, we need to add, oh, it isn't on my notes up quite yet. There is one item we'd like to add, the personnel policy back from the last council meeting that we had tabled. It got missed when we were making the agenda. It needs to be added as item K. Please and thank you. Personal policy update, which was on the last council meeting. No changes are being requested at this time. We do have legal counsel here, so we'd like to have discussions on those if we have any questions on those from last council meeting, which I do have some of them written down, and then move the budget discussion item to item L.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, it got missed. Timelines and vacations and discussions.
Okay.
So you went L instead of K.
So personal policy will be before the continued budget discussion.
Okay.
So that personal
Oh,
policy
I
will be
gotcha.
item K,
Yep.
and then item L will be the continued budget discussion. Also note for the general public, if you did not receive the updated agenda, item C was swapped out on this agenda. It's just a note. Previously was the approval of final plat for DCM Farms. That is now a pay application for well treatment plant to Magni Construction. DCM Farms requested to be removed off the agenda. But to make sure that was noted. That's it. Thank you.
They'll be on the next agenda.
Yes.
Will it be on consent? Why was that on consent?
All of our final plats have been on consent.
Okay, any changes? Any other discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Carries 5-0. Consent. I need a motion and a second.
Motion.
Need a second? And I need a
Second. I was just checking my notes.
Okay, discussion.
I have a question. If I can start. Is
Yep.
that all right?
All right.
It's for our chief, Gary. The extrication training, you've got a couple of different items on here. There's the extrication training saw blades, which came out of the fire department's budget on page 42. Should that also come out of that contingency fund instead of being, that should not come out of the 42260, it should come out of the 49999?
Yes, I noticed that tonight. That does need to go to the other fund because that's been offset by tuition of other students.
Right, so then it's not charged directly to the department.
Correct.
Okay.
So we need to make that adjustment.
We will make that adjustment. Thank you.
You good?
Yeah, that's all I got.
I had two questions, I guess. On page 26, we had two purchases for PD uniforms for new employees from Aspen Mills, and both were exactly the same amount. Were these two different guys, or is that a duplicate charge somehow?
Nope, two different people.
Two different people?
Correct.
Got exactly the same stuff?
Correct.
Amazing. All right, cool.
We have uniform standards that we have at Aspen Mills, so they go in, they get all the same equipment that we have put on the list there.
Yeah, good. It just stood out to me because it was an identical amount. And
Yep.
Usually it doesn't work out that way. And then on page 36, I do not know whose charge this was, but maybe I can figure it out. It was for, this was credit card, that's why I can't tell. Did you have May phones for $711? I'm just curious what that is.
It's just our telephone. So it's just Digium is the company that we use, so it is a
Okay.
monthly charge.
Essentially, we lease our telephones that are our desk phones from the
Because they're voice over.
because they're voice over
Yeah.
IP
IP,
phones.
yes.
We essentially lease them.
Okay, and that's a monthly charge?
It might be a by month. specifically. I'll have to look at that one, but
Okay.
It's up.
I just didn't remember seeing it before, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there, so. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Anybody else? Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. Consent carries 5-0. Open forum. Is anybody here for open forum? Open forum limited to 3 months. 3 months. 3 months. 3 minutes for non-agenda items. State your name and address. No council action will be taken. Items will be referred back to staff.
Okay. Marcia Grover, 11320 Fernbrook Lane, Dayton, Minnesota. I do have a question. DCM has started moving all their stuff around, and we have semis coming in with equipment at like 6:30 in the morning, squealing their brakes as they stop to make the corner onto 113th. And we have to listen to that at 6:30 in the morning. So I'm wondering what the rules and regulations are for them. Also, regarding the Apadan Company building, a couple weeks ago in the Star Tribune, there was a big article about them. And they are primarily a data center, and they use tremendous amounts of utilities, water and electricity primarily. And I guess if they have many facilities around the state, according to this article. And also, I would really be against our city financing any of the utilities for any of these companies that come in, these data centers, telephone companies, whatever you have, that use tremendous amounts of energy. I would really, really be against financing any kind of utilities for them.
thank you.
Thank you.
So what do you think about the timing for the construction? Is there a time they can start and a time they can stop? They have to stop?
7 o'clock is what it is.
7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Doesn't mean that the trucks can't roll in, but they just can't physically start the
Yeah.
Can we do
physical
something
construction.
about them using their air brakes and making that squealing noise at 6:30 in the morning?
I'm gonna look to the police chief.
Wouldn't that be no?
No, because you don't live on the corner of 113. It's then coming from either direction on Fernbrook and going on to 13.
We would need,
It's such a small intersection that they really have to slow down and practically stop.
Go ahead, Paul.
And so they don't realize it until they get there. And then they think, oh my God, I gotta stop, and throw the air brakes.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, as far as the roads are considered, they're able to travel the roads. As far as the air brakes, we would have to have a certified noise detection system there to determine if they're over the legal limit or not.
Anybody else for open forum? Anybody online? Oh,
Yeah, I'm not going to interrupt that. Good grief. I'd like to sit here and rant for about half an hour. Obviously, nobody goes down 121 in your neighborhood, but you can't go anyplace from where we live anymore. Lee Hallquist, by the way, 11471 Fernbrook Lane. And I got a whole bunch of complaints, but it's not going to do any good, so. Biggest one, I think, Thursday at 7:20 in the morning, my house is shaking. My coffee's jiggling in the cup, my dishes, every dish in my shelves and cupboards is shaking because the tractors are there, and they're not even as close as they're gonna be to my house. And I know it doesn't bother you if you don't live in the neighborhood, but it's getting to be annoying. For the most part, they've been good. Tom has been great about routing stuff where it was, but sometimes that noise is gonna be unbearable, and it's a sensitive issue to me. What else do I want to complain about? Drainage, you haven't fixed that, of course. I remember when they built Brooklyn Park, Brooklyn Center, when there was nothing north of 69th but potato fields, and I feel like you guys are doing the same thing. I didn't realize, drove around today trying to find some new routes home, because you can't come up Fernbrook anymore, and there's like no way. It's like went down to French Lake today, it's over half an hour to get down to French Lake, Fish Lake rather. It's just incredible. I mean, And all kinds of signs up there saying we can't, and, you know, I know I'm taking your time, and I know it's not gonna have an effect, but it's just really irritating. You know, you guys can make a ton of money off it, and it's gonna cost us money, and I'm upset about that, so. Anyway, that's all I got before I get really angry, so. Y'all have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Keith Grover, 113th in Fernbrook. I'd explain the issue with the brakes, I think, a little more clearly, that Marcia was talking about. It's not so much the brakes on the trucks. The big trucks are noisy. We know that, right? But we don't have an ordinance that deals with Jake brakes. And those things are like 10 times louder than a vehicle going by on the road because they're using the exhaust system and the compression of the diesel engine to actually slow the truck down rather than using the air brakes on their truck. I understand why they do that because it saves on brakes. I understand trucks and how they work. But it literally rattles the windows in the house just from the Jake brake on the trucks. And I know there are some communities around that have ordinances against no Jake brake usage. And I think with as much truck traffic as we're having in the city, we may be at that point where we consider doing something like that because it's just incredibly loud. It sounds like somebody's shooting off M80s as they're trying to slow those big trucks down. The other issue, and I hate to keep beating up the intersections there, but you know, I'm out of the loop, so I don't know everything that you guys know. But no one has said anything to those of us that live in the area about a change on 113th, other than the DCM plans to run it across the field and potentially put a roundabout at 114th. But most people that I talk to don't seem to think that that's going to help the situation with the traffic in front of us. But the intersection with Elm Creek Road and Rush Creek Parkway, I know there's been some discussion there at the county level, and again, I don't know how far the whole discussion goes of maybe putting, at least on a temporary basis, putting stop signs at that intersection with the plan at some future date to fund some way of putting a roundabout at Rush Creek Parkway to slow the traffic down and at least make that intersection safe to use. It's just dangerous as heck to go in and out of there, and it gets worse every day, although this week they blocked the traffic off going south, so now we get the traffic all on Rush Creek Parkway and Elm Creek Road. I mean, they're coming flying through there from both directions. I was out in the front yard this afternoon, later in the afternoon, when the rush hour starts picking up and going, where the heck are all these cars coming from? Because I know they have Fernbrook Lane closed. So I went out and stood in the road, and I watched these steady stream of cars coming across through the neighborhood, the Rush Creek, in the development over there, and also coming from the east down Elm Creek Road, which both have signs on that says local traffic only, but those are being used as cutoff. And they're going to get worse because when people figure it out, they tell two friends and they tell two friends, and oh yeah, you can go around it by going this way. So we're going to have heavy traffic on the parkway, going right by the kids' playground in the new development back there, and coming through the park where we have bike trails and horse trails and kids riding their bikes on the road, on Elm Creek Road, and rollerblading on Elm Creek Road. I'm not sure what the solution is to all of that, but it just comes back to the intersections, Rush Creek Parkway probably would be very well suited for a roundabout. The Elm Creek Road and Fernbrook situation, and 117th would be too. But then halfway between those two, you've got the dilemma of what do you do with the potential road coming out 114th and 113th meeting up with and stuffing a roundabout in an area that there really isn't room for either. So I don't know, my whole thought is, and this is what I brought up before, maybe 113th should just be closed and the traffic should get routed and put a roundabout at 117th and a roundabout at Rush Creek Parkway, and route the traffic to those improved intersections rather than try to find money to put 3 of them in a, quarter of a mile or a half a mile stretch. It just seems, I don't think you're going to get the county to do that. And I don't think anybody here's got a money tree in their backyard, so.
I wish.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, shooting for 2 of those might be doable. 3 of them is probably pie in the sky. And even having 3 of them in there, I don't think it solves our problem. You still have the heavy traffic on 117th. That's going to continue to get worse because they're building more down there all the time. If we do commercial down there, people are going to be cutting across there to get to that commercial over by French Lake. So that's just a thought process, and it's kind of what's going on in my mind. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any more? Anybody online?
If you wanted to speak in open forum, if you can use the raise your hand function. I'm not seeing any.
All right, we will be on to staff consultant council updates. Zach?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I have 2 updates for you tonight. First one is related to our Housing First case that we haven't heard about in a little while. We did get an email this week that maybe Amy can expand on more, because it's, again, more legal language that I'd want to understand half of it. But essentially, the judge that was hearing our case gave us a motion for a summary judgment in our favor and denied Housing First summary judgment. So Housing First now has a 60-day timeline to appeal, or the case will be completed. I am knocking on wood that the case is completed, because it's been going on for 4 years. So I am hopeful that it is done.
What are they thinking about for 60 days?
They are looking for, and I'll look at Amy, because again, I don't know all the legal jargon. Declaratory and injunctive relief is from what I understand, but I don't know what that all means in legal language, so.
Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. That is what they were asking for. So the way that this went through, and obviously I'm not the litigation counsel, so I don't have a lot of expertise on the ins and outs of all the details, but after the first round up to the Court of Appeals and then to the Minnesota Supreme Court, the only thing that was left after all of those decisions were made was they still had this claim that they wanted injunctive relief, like a restraining order. But the ruling that the city got yesterday that was favorable to the city basically said that Housing First, because everything else has already been disposed of, there's nothing left to, you have to have an underlying claim to get the injunctive relief on top of it, basically. So without that underlying claim, because all of those were already resolved, the case just fails at that point.
Yeah, but they'll sit on it for 60 days and
Right.
use their time anyway.
Well, what they can do is, because right now we're waiting for the judgment to be docketed. As of yesterday, that hadn't happened yet, so that 60-day clock isn't, as Monty Mills said, isn't ticking yet. But from that day when the 60 days starts, the Housing First will have that time to make a decision about whether they want to appeal this decision back to the Minnesota Court of Appeals. So that's what we're waiting for, what we would be waiting for at this point.
Thank you.
So that's good news. Second good news, and I want to get an update to everybody, it's either watching this later on or now in the council chambers, is that they are installing stop signs at Fernbrook and Rush Creek Parkway. We have confirmation from that from the county. I got an email today. That will be done. We have pushed to have it done at the same time Fernbrook is being closed, and they have confirmed that they will be doing that. So a message board will be added this Thursday for electronic messaging on that to let them know that there will be a change in that. Stop signs being added, as in a traffic change at that intersection. Those are going to be installed by July 10th. So we have a confirmed date from the county. July 10th will be the date that stop signs will be added to Fernbrook and Rush Creek Parkway. Those are my updates for you tonight. Thank you.
Amy?
I just wanted to update legislation changed for your remote attendance, so you no longer have to be in a public space. We would still post that you would be remote and an approximate location, but you don't have to be publicly accessible. And there's no longer a limit on how many remote meetings you can do within the year.
So if I was sick, I could still call in from home?
You could, yes. Yep. And I might have to look at that. I think we still have to post it within the 3 days.
That's right. Okay.
So we would have to know ahead of time.
So I have to know I was going to be sick in 3
Yeah.
days.
Or plan to just do the meeting remote.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. But yeah. So no, not a last minute
Okay.
change, but for a known cause, then
Okay,
it's.
so like if you had surgery or something and
Yep.
that would be okay.
Yep.
But food poisoning, no.
Right. You can always join, you just wouldn't be able to vote
Got it,
if
got it.
that was the case.
Okay.
And then just oversight, the park commission appointment will actually be on the next agenda. I was late with getting applications for those, so we're just giving them additional time to get more applications, and then the same process will be on the next agenda for that. So it's not that we didn't have any, it's just they weren't ready at the same time. And that's all I have for updates.
Marty?
I only have one update tonight. Elizabeth had an event today, first time she's done it, a play place in the park at Rivers Bend Park. She's partnered with Hennepin County Library. They brought their truck out there. She had 65 people participate today, so it was a good turnout.
Chief?
No update.
Chief?
No.
Jason? Amy?
Well, Zach and Amy took mine, so.
Scott?
I got nothing.
I have a question about the lighting ordinance that was it hasn't come to council yet. It was at planning commission, got tabled. Is that on, where is that in the process?
Basically, we'll have a summary of the conversation that we had for the planning commission meeting in May, in July, touching up on some of the comments that they had. Hopefully we can get a motion for recommendation at that meeting, and then you'll see that at your second meeting in July.
Okay, cool. Thank you. I was just curious where that was in the process.
Anything else?
That's it.
I wanted to thank the police chief, and the police department for their diligence during the investigation of the Hoffman shootings. Appreciate that. Where are we at with the right-of-way on South Dayton Parkway? Is that still up in the air?
We did get an update today from, I'm going to say, Elzafon, who's the other developer on the other property. He's working on our behalf and seems to have gotten through to Mr. Streeter to move forward with it. So it sounds like it's all positive from our understanding, is that we used our resources to try to push a little more. So it sounds like that has gone well, and we are working with that. We just met with him today at 3:30, 4 o'clock, something like that. So we just got that update as of a couple
As
of
in
it's in positive, as in he looks like he's going to be able to give us the right of way as part of the plat. So
okay.
we should be back at square one and not
Negative?
negative.
Negative squares. So that's all I got.
Thank you.
I had a resident contact me, and this is in, do you have something else?
Go ahead. No, but
This is in light of the shooting situation that occurred a week ago, and I thought it was an interesting point that because of the way that crime transpired, his question was why in Dayton are public safety vehicles, police and fire, not uniformly marked? And I said, well, we have some different vintages of vehicles, but we also have unmarked vehicles, and then some vehicles that are, marked from the time that they were purchased or painted that way, and not uniform. And I think the point is valid in that, somebody comes to your house or somebody pulls you over, you want to be have some level of comfort that yes, this is the Dayton Police or this is the Dayton Fire Department that just pulled up to my place, and how the vehicle is having uniform marking on the vehicle, I think is the right answer to that. And so I guess my question is, have we standardized on the new vehicles we're purchasing? And, if not, shouldn't we be?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we, for the most part, have standardized our outfitted vehicles to the same graphics. We do have ghost graphics on some vehicles for both traffic reasons and visibility reasons. So like at night, you might see ghost graphics just because you're going into business areas looking for thieves or suspects and anything else. So a lot of our night vehicles do have the ghost graphics. And as it was put in the news, if you ever feel unsafe and you don't feel safe that it's not a police officer, call 911, talk to the dispatch. They'll be able to confirm whether it's a police officer or not. So, but most vehicles that we are going with are going to be a standardized outlook.
Okay, and do we have cars that are completely unmarked, or do we have just the ghost graphics?
Most of our admin vehicles are completely unmarked, and our investigator units are unmarked, completely unmarked cars.
Okay, and is there a reason why admin vehicles are not marked?
Admin vehicles, for the most part, are traveling mostly to meetings, not responding to calls for service. Mostly, you're going to have a marked unit show up at your house, unless the marked units are tied up and the admin vehicles have to take the calls for them.
Yeah, and I think that was part of his point was that, you know, if they're not uniformly marked, then raises a question and some concern. Obviously, people are kind of anxious about how this whole thing came together.
Yep, completely understandable, but number one thing to do is if you don't feel safe that you're being pulled over is to call 911 and confirm through the dispatchers that the police officer is a true police officer.
All right, thank you. That's all I have.
I did have a resident, apparently Maple Grove water stopped at some point, and she was very livid that she couldn't get a hold of anybody for 2.5 hours.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So this was Friday after hours.
Well, it was Friday at like 2.
It was, the water was shut off at 12:30. It was back on by around about 2:30. So what happened, a developer had run over a curb stop. We had to get it fixed immediately. So we got the contractor was there. He went out and started making a repair to get it done as quickly as possible. Normally in these situations, it's very difficult to get people out. I can send them around to do the door knocking because they're taking them longer than to make the repair.
Yeah.
I did answer a number of calls myself, and I did get a hold of Maple Grove to tell, they were getting calls as well, and I told them what was going on. I spoke with Paul, the police chief, and let him know what it was going on and give him a timeline of what might be happening. I did speak with residents in the neighborhood. And I did talk with one of the residents who was running the Facebook page, and she put a blast out on that Facebook page. There's not too much more that I can do with that. Even if we put something out on the website, you can't guarantee that everybody's going to see that. So it's just one of those unfortunate emergency situations. The water was down for, maximum of 3 hours.
Yeah, that's what she.
Do you know where this was? Was it in Braeburn Trails?
Say again?
Was it in Braeburn Trails, or where was that?
It was Territorial Trails and Territorial Commons.
Okay. I'm wondering if is that a loop system there, Jason?
There's 2 feeds from Maple Grove, one west of I-94 and the other one in the middle of Sundance Woods development.
That would have
So it
fed
should have been
Territorial.
fed from both sides with that
That's why-
section isolated.
That's why I'm confused.
Yeah, I don't think the issue was the water being down. I think her issue was she couldn't get a hold of anybody.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, a number of people did get a hold of me.
Yeah.
So.
Okay.
And I did hear from people who had sent in a contact form. If they'd gone down scrolled down one more, they could have got my contact number directly there.
All right.
Can we circle back really quick? Sorry, to what David had said about the markings on the vehicles.
Yeah.
Our fire department, we only have one vehicle, correct, Chief, that's not marked?
Correct, that is correct.
Have we looked at getting graphics on that vehicle since it does respond to calls?
We've not graphicked it for budgetary reasons.
Is this something we could maybe look into again, even if it's simple graphics? I think that, in light of everything that's happened.
Vehicles should be marked.
Correct, and that's what I'm saying is like we don't allow our firefighters to respond right from their homes for that reason, so that way you do indeed know that someone's getting off of a rig that's clearly marked. And so I would think that that would be one of those instances where it would make sense for us to have some sort of Dayton Fire graphic on that vehicle, so that way if it's the first to respond to a call, we know for sure that that is Dayton Fire showing up at your door, because you could be wearing the clothes we have on, like you're not always in your uniform that you're wearing now. You might be, but I'm just saying the vehicle itself. So
Yeah, we can
just
look at it,
something we
yeah.
can look at to
It
see.
Came in as budgetary issues that we had to cut some things, and that was the first thing that was cut. Is the easiest one. Is do we need graphics? No, we don't need graphics. Okay, cool, sounds good.
Just curious, how much are graphics for a vehicle? I have no idea what that number is.
It depends.
Okay.
5,000?
Yeah.
Okay.
Something like that.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be anything huge, but even something just on the door. Like it doesn't have to say, like I think Chief 2's vehicle says Dayton Chief. It could just say Dayton Fire or have the emblem on the hood. Just something to identify it.
Sure. Yeah, we could look at something. That's fine.
I was just curious, I didn't know the number.
I would be willing to talk about it
Like I said,
again.
pretty even. Just basic graphics is like $5,000.
Okay.
If you get more advanced ones, now you're talking 10 to 12 to 13 grand pretty quickly. So.
Yeah, if we could just look into it, it would be nice to have a number to look at, because again, it responds directly to incidents. So I'd like to know who's coming to my house, personally.
Sure. Anything else?
Oh, I did have a resident reached out to me. It's my turn. Did I jump you?
No.
Okay. A resident reached out about was it Well House 5? Is that what we call it? And asking if there was going to be any additional screening of the backup generator, because it's a little bit of an eyesore when you're driving down the beautiful boulevard and there's always beautiful trees, and then there's that big
I
old
think
box.
there is some landscaping that's going around there.
Okay.
I'd have to double check that. I'm not sure if it's been installed yet. I think it probably has.
Okay.
But it's very young at the moment, so it's got to fill out. So
And I did drive by, and I was like, it looks like some trees were planted along
Yeah.
the edge. I was just wondering if it was complete.
yeah, I think that's where it's at. I think those shrubs or whatever,
No.
ornamental trees, whatever they are, there
Yeah.
will fill out and mask it somewhere.
Okay.
Because it was in a residential area, we did put some effort into making it look like it's something, not just a brick building stuck in the middle of nowhere.
A big gray box.
Exactly.
I appreciate that, Marty. Thank you.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you.
All right, on to item E.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight you're asked to consider a concept plan for an industrial development proposed at the corner of West French Lake Road and 121st Avenue. The site was proposed for the principal use would be considered a contractor's operation as in the zoning ordinance. The overall site here is 8.43 acres and is currently an outlot of Dayton Field 4th Edition. If you recall, maybe last year or the year before, there was an approved project for this site in connection with the adjacent parcel there. Currently, this site's been left as an outlot and was never final platted for development, and as such, now a new proposal is coming to you for review. The property is guided industrial and currently zoned I-1 light industrial. It's in the current staging area in the comp plan. Here's a general overview. I'll have a bigger picture of this on the next slide. But the overall development is construction of a 26,000 square foot building split between 18,000 square feet of warehouse shop area, and then the remainder being office space. The single access proposed on 121st Avenue aligns with the Invent building that is directly across, or I believe it's been often referred to as the Capital Partners site. Employee parking and customer parking is proposed to be in front of the building outside of the fenced-in area that you saw in your packet, which was outlined in this red here. Essentially, the applicants are proposing from the back corner here on this side of the building all the way around up to the front as a screening fence for outdoor storage, as well as security fence for some of the equipment and vehicles that will be stored on site for the business itself. associated with this would be the accessory use outdoor storage area. The total area, and this is conceptual design, so you're not going to see the identified drive aisles within this area, which would otherwise be netted out of that understood outdoor storage area, is proposed to be over 45,000 square feet. All of which, except for roughly 10,000 square feet, is currently proposed as asphalt. The remaining area is proposed in this back corner as Class 2 gravel. The applicant has stated that the majority reason for the proposed gravel is related to large tracked equipment that could potentially cause continuous damage to any asphalt or potentially concrete within that area. And here's just a larger photo of the site. The wetlands currently are bounded by this parking area. As noted in the plan review letter, there are some touch-ups that will be required as part of the square footage that is included in the buffer area of the wetland. And then there is, I believe, that maybe an existing, I can't remember if this is an existing stormwater pond on the site as well. Through our review of the zoning ordinance for the I-1 industrial, architectural designs are generally consistent with the standards in the zoning district, no concerns there. There was a little discussion related to accenting. I don't think there was any clear direction from the Planning Commission related to what needs to be changed. I think overall the Planning Commission were in consensus that this was aligned with the I-1 district standards. Here'd be the back side of those buildings as well. Kind of a side, directly north of that gravel area proposed is the what we would consider a staging area or a loading area for these docks. Here's a view of the site generally looking south. Through the review of the I-1 standard requirements and the proposed site layout, everything is in compliance with the setbacks related to the building as well as parking. No concerns there. One of the things that was undefined that I couldn't provide was the overall height of the building was not clear in the plans that were provided. That would be something that they would have to submit with their architectural elevations, just so we can verify that the setbacks meet the height standards. In regards to maximum impervious surface, building footprint coverage, there's no concerns there. As I mentioned about the height, it is undefined. Anything above 50 feet requires a CUP. Just from the general look of the building itself, I don't see that being a concern. My guess is that typical building that we've seen like this would have a clear view height of maybe 32 feet. Regarding some considerations that were identified during this review, a lot of it is related to the outdoor storage. Just general standards for the outdoor storage, a conditional use permit is required, so that would be something that would be reviewed as part of the preliminary plat package, just kind of as a one application package in total. There is landscaping requirements on top of what would be required for the building design that would be reviewed as well, to help with that additional screening as part of the fence plan that they have provided. The Planning Commission's majority discussion focused on the overall layout of the outdoor storage area, and that there is roughly 9,000 to 10,000 square feet currently that is proposed to be gravel. Just a note, in the I-1 district, the outdoor storage is limited to paved surface such as bituminous asphalt or concrete. The applicants have stated that they do propose to use Class 2, which is, from my understanding, it's easier to mitigate dust control or easier to deal with dust control on Class 2 than Class 5. I will just note too, the code doesn't offer flexibility to this standard unless through a PUD or a variance. So that was the kind of the conversation that we had at the Planning Commission meeting. Overall, the Planning Commission was in general, they were okay with the proposed area, or at least a portion of the area being gravel. I didn't get any guidance on how we wanted to address that specifically. whether that be a code amendment to offer flexibility aside from allowing a variance in a new development or going through the planned unit development and identifying a public benefit for a development like this. I think the overall consensus was to have staff work with the developer to try and minimize that as much as possible. So that would be something that we would do throughout the preliminary plat, or that information has been passed on to the developer to consider if it
I'm
moves
surprised we
forward.
haven't run into this before, given, because I know a lot of this equipment will rip up that pavement. I mean, we've got, quite a few manufacturers, or at least, companies that have this equipment on their property. It does seem odd that it hasn't come up. I have no problem with it. I think we should allow, where they feel it's necessary, we should allow, especially like a Class 2. But
Do we need to update the code then?
If that's something that the council wants to, I guess, entertain for new development proposals, my recommendation would be to address it in the code rather than trying to justify a variance in this regard, especially with the new development. So that would be my recommendation if that were the case. I will say that language I believe was adopted in the middle of 2022. There was a lot of industrial district updates that occurred, and that was one of those things that was included in there. And then that discussion also wound up being the 20% maximum area for the outdoor storage area, or 2 acres, whichever is less type of thing. I think the overall intent of that was if a 30-acre property was looking to have outdoor storage, there wasn't going to be 6 acres of outdoor storage out there. So that would be my recommendation, and we can certainly look into that.
Would it be possible to get that done in time for this project?
Yes, I would say that at the very least, we would run that concurrently and probably review that section prior to a preliminary plat if it's the same meeting.
Okay.
That would be the last resort.
Any advantages over crushed bituminous?
That was discussed, I think, a little bit at the planning commission meeting too. I don't know if there's any specifics. I was looking through the minutes of the discussions on why the requirement for paved material was necessary in all I-1 properties. I don't know if there was a reason beyond aesthetics.
It's industrial.
I'm guessing that's what it was.
And there was some of you that were on the city council at that time, and I'm not going to rely on you to recollect that by any means, but
Well, I would rather see us deal with it in the ordinance than try to justify a variance. It seems like it's supposed to be a high bar, and I don't know how you get there with this on a variance. But I do think there's legitimate need for this kind of thing. You don't want to require pavement knowing that it's not going to hold up anyway. But I think having it in the ordinance, at least that way we've got opportunity to beat it up a little more and talk about, is it Class 2, is it Class 5, is it crushed granite, is it, what does make sense to us and to the users, of course. It needs to ultimately be usable by the property owner. So I would rather see us do it that way.
sure. And I think the one benefit that the way that the code is currently written too is that there might be a little bit of language that would be needed, but I think addressing the surfacing materials would probably be something we would pick up as part of the conditional use permit resolution, being a condition of approval, maybe limiting or identifying specific areas based on a site plan. So there are ways that they can at least try and work with the city and mitigate any types of potential nuisances that would come from gravel outdoor storage. So that will be something that we'll look into and likely bring that back yet this summer to the planning commission so we can be ahead of a potential preliminary plat application for this. The other thing is still, the other consideration that I wanted to note is still related to the outdoor storage area. The code does not allow outdoor storage when the property, or when it abuts property that is guided for residential. I will say that we did reach out while we were reviewing this application, so I'll go back to the site plan here for a second. This property here, further to the west, is directly adjacent to the mobile home park or the manufactured home park. And in the 2040 comp plan is actually guided for an expansion of that manufactured home park. Since that comp plan has been adopted, the previous owners of the manufactured home park sold that park to a new group and retained this property. And Zach, John, and I actually met with the property owner of the adjacent parcel to this site, and they said while they had original intentions to expand, there's no plan moving forward for an expansion of the manufactured home park. Based on that conversation, and Zach and John can clarify, but it seems like they would be open to other alternatives if someone was willing to develop the site in a different manner. So that's just something to consider, I guess, related to this project.
So it's guided currently
As manufactured
residential?
home park.
It is, okay.
Yeah, we saw that, some versions of that expansion.
Yeah, we did. I didn't realize we had changed the.
Yeah. But there is, being what that as it may, it's guided for that mobile home park usage today, and I think that's the lens we need to use in reviewing this. But having said that, I think there's good opportunity for buffering, and so on the way that this site is laid out, that shouldn't be that big of a concern. It's not to me anyway.
When we were thinking about that too at a staff level, and there is a large wetland that is on the southwest side of this property that takes up a lot of that existing, or that vacant mobile home property. And this site is significantly elevated compared to that adjacent parcel as well. So just the natural layout of the two properties already work well as a buffer, and there are, again, as I mentioned before, there is screening requirements that are required for the outdoor storage area. So certainly there are ways to mitigate that. And things might change with that property as we look into the updated comp plan review. Just to summarize here, the other considerations is related to the parking. Office spaces do require 1 space per 200 square feet of floor space, requiring a minimum 40 for this site, and the shop does require 1 space per 2,000 square feet. The stall dimensions do not currently meet the code standard of 10 by 20, though the spaces that are on the outside curb are allowed to be 18 feet, as there is sufficient room for an overhang. So just a minor detail there. Through my review, I believe that the parking calculations are satisfactory for the use that is going to be here. 77 parking spaces is a significant number that they're having outside of that fenced-in area. We didn't receive a landscape plan or anything like that, as this is a concept, so it wouldn't be something that would be anticipated. But the expectation is that the landscaping will be compliant with the zoning ordinance section that guides it, as well as the added landscape for the outdoor storage area. And then I also did note earlier the wetland buffer needs to be addressed a little bit, as the average width does not meet that 25 minimum. Related to this, these would be the anticipated future applications that you would see with a plan like this. All of these listed above can be applied for concurrently and reviewed by the City Council concurrently. And likely the way that this conversation has gone so far, you'll likely see that ordinance amendment occur prior to making a decision on a preliminary plat for this property. That's really all I have. Feel free to ask any questions or and review, and the applicants are here tonight to discuss and clarify any questions that you may have. All comments are advisory, and we are not looking for any action tonight.
I don't have anything. Anybody else?
I don't have anything.
I have a couple of minor things. So, well, you already mentioned the wetland buffering has to get expanded, and I also understand that this is preliminary, but I didn't love that the fuel tanks are closest to the narrowest wetland buffer. I feel like, if anything, the fuel tanks should be by the largest buffer. But again, it's preliminary, so maybe those could just get shifted somewhere. Just that's what I would want most buffered from a wetland would be my fuel.
Sure.
So, but again, I recognize it's preliminary, so those could change. And then, you've already mentioned it, but I just want to second, like, I don't mind outdoor storage by residential as long as it's adequately screened. And like the fencing in my mind is going to serve two purposes. There's a security aspect to the fencing for the company themselves, but then there's also like the aesthetics. And so I think particularly with the potential that you might have residential neighbors, that puts the onus on making it look pretty, basically. And if they can, whether that's with landscaping, shrubs or the fencing material itself, but as long as we can have some sort of, I don't know if guarantee is the right word, but basically some sort of guarantee that it would not be a giant eyesore to their neighbor living next to it, I'm fine with it. So those are my two minor things.
Yeah, we can certainly work with the applicant when they're putting together the preliminary plat package to maybe provide some samples of what type of materials they would anticipate to use.
Yeah.
The outdoor storage area is expected to be 100% opaque fence, no transparency, you can't see through that. I will say that
That doesn't mean it's pretty.
Correct, yes. That's true. I will say too that the Planning Commission did discuss the front part of the fence as well, related to that's not necessarily being the outdoor storage area for screening, but because it would be so close to the front of the property. From my understanding, the Planning Commission would like to consider maybe more, you could see through it, or it's a more decorative style fencing in general, so.
I totally get the need for opaque, you don't want people to see through, but I live near some opaque fencing that is not pretty. So there's two parts to that. Those would be my only comments. And then this, maybe topographies, but my initial thought was, could you just shift everything a little bit, and that would automatically give you some additional room next to where the potential neighbors are. Like if the whole thing could get shifted just a tiny bit to the east, right? But I don't know, I haven't been out there to look at the topography. That might just not be, that might be a non-starter, but that was kind of my initial, like, just shift everything. It automatically gives you a bigger buffer to the neighbors, potential neighbors, to the wetland, all those things, so.
Sure. I can't speak to that personally, but I'm sure that the applicants have their reasoning for the way that it's currently laid out.
Yeah.
And the one thing that I will just note about the fuel tanks too, in proximity to the wetland, that asphalt area and potentially, I'll have to look at the code to see if it is a requirement or not, but my understanding is that at least the asphalt area would be curbed.
Okay.
So there would be
So it's
at least-
captured.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, I may be the only one here, but I am a little bit fuzzy on what the nature of the business is. I understand it's construction related to e-commerce, telecom, fiber, something. So I wouldn't mind if the applicant would explain a little bit more, or describe a little bit more what kind of business they're in and how they anticipate using this site, because I understand also it's a satellite to their primary office.
Certainly.
The applicant can come up. Name and address.
I'm Tim McShane Development Consultant on behalf of Telecom 6975, Foxglove Circle, Excelsior, Minnesota. And I have the developer owner of the property here with me as well. We do have the owner and civil engineer in attendance, so we're going to address some of the things you brought up. And then we got a couple things we would like to discuss as well. So first of all, if I may, just thank you for entertaining our proposal this evening. Telcom is very excited about expanding into the Twin Cities and specifically into Dayton as their satellite office to serve the Twin Cities area. They're based in Clearwater. That's their initial base. They've got other offices around the Midwest. And in a few minutes, I will have the owner explain to you specifically what it is that they do. I'd like to just make a few comments before we get into some other details. Time is of the essence. Would love to start this fall. So as it relates to changing the ordinance, if we could do that concurrently, so as we come through in August, assuming we do that, that could all be done at the same time, that would be awesome. You were asking about clear height. It's 24-foot clear, so well within your guidelines, just to be clear on that. The Class 2 is actually crushed granite rather than crushed concrete, which even reduces the dust further. So that's why we use that. The runoff, I don't know if I heard a comment about that, but the runoff goes to the ponds, not to the wetland. Just want to clarify that as well. The fencing, I can assure you, will be attractive. We'll work with staff on that, so
Thank you.
we understand. And Mark has used that in his other businesses as well. So we'll definitely take care of that as we go through the process. Fencing will be attractive. As far as shifting to the east, our civil engineer, we did give him direction to push this as far to the east as humanly possible. And so with the topography, that is as far as we can go, so hopefully.
Yeah, I kind of figured, but I thought I'd throw it out there.
Yeah, that addresses that. The one thing we would like to talk about is the city fees this evening and the level of those fees. We've discussed this with staff ahead of time, so this is not a surprise to staff. I don't know if you all are aware of our concern there. We'll talk about that at the end. Prior to doing that, I'm going to ask Mark, the owner, to come up and tell you a little bit about his business per your request, David.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Appreciate the opportunity here. Our business is servicing communications companies within your, like a Lumen, a Windstream, and then your independent telcos, and then you have this overbuild companies that are now coming into the metropolitan area. We also service. So we project manage, we build those systems. We also have our own workforce that works there. We also use some subcontractors in the communities or surrounding communities. You know, from a small end, the equipment that we're using seems to always be a thing people want to know the most. We don't use any large track equipment. You know, like if you guys build your roundabouts you were talking about earlier, and we have to come out and replace the cables around there for the communications, move them out of the way. A lot of times we'll dig those with a backhoe, and then we'll use a smaller dozer to push those shut, or we use what we call a quad plow, track plow. It's just a quad. It's not like a big dozer. So you know, if you want to look at it this way, the largest equipment we have that would be in these facilities, or this facility, would be something that you fit like on a backhoe trailer behind a larger dump truck. It's not going to be, you know, these big, when you look at RDO there, you got their large equipment. Look at the small equipment in the yard. That's typically what we use. We use the directional drills. If you look at RDO, there's, you know, with Vermeer. We use a lot of Vermeer products, so it kind of helps with our business too. We already have a working relationship with them nationally, so it kind of fits hand in hand there too. And you know, as you know, they unload their equipment there. If, you know, their parking areas does have some Class 2 or gravel areas for unloading, loading, those sort of things. You know, some of the machines we're using is just placing a drop, you know, a foot deep, 6 inches deep, you know, from the pedestal across the private property to the home for services. And the others is just plowing the cable, you know, in the road right away. That's a lot of what we do. Then we also do the fiber optic splicing. We have teams that do that in the metro. And then we have restoration crews that we put out to do the restoration, you know, for the homeowner property businesses. We don't intend to at this time, intend. We don't keep a lot of disposals of those. They go to a dump from the job site. There is a fair amount of the equipment that never really comes back to the facility, maybe in the winter. And a lot of the stuff that's there is, you know, in a 1-ton truck F-350, we'll have F-150s, 350s, and then probably some 550s. And they'll have trailers behind them that smaller equipment sitting on. Will we have a lowboy come through occasionally, or one working in the area? Yeah, but it doesn't mean it's there every day. We're not running semis in and out consistently. It's more, stuff that requires a lesser license, lesser weight. There's no road noise from these. There's no braking systems that's creating noise for, the surrounding area. So those are the things we do. As far as storage, the building is large in our standard, so there'll be a fair amount of indoor storage. We do have a couple bays there that we'd be fixing on the equipment, but primarily the outdoor storage, we're looking at an 8-foot fence. We plan on doing the appropriate, working with your teams, the aesthetics, planting trees, different things. The fence, we are going to go with an 8-foot fence. I commonly do that both for the safety. It's a little harder to climb over. The other side is if that's a screened, not just a chain link open fence, it will match the building. Typically, like this one here, kind of the offset would be like maybe a blue or something there that, with working with your teams, is appropriate. So you would not have visibility, and a lot of our storage is 2 pallets high, which is 8 feet. So there's not going to be that visibility behind that fence, like, it's not stacked like inside a warehouse where you're 4 pallets high. So that won't exist out there. There are some trucks they asked on the last time that we got like 2.5 tons trucks. They're like a smaller single axle dump truck version that, or it's got a van body on it, but it's a single. Some of them are twin screw, but it's just water tanks pulling a directional drill on it. So, but if there's any other questions on that, I'd be happy to answer.
It's primarily the cable and fiber that's being put
communications,
in the right of way
yeah.
that you're doing.
Yeah.
This is self-serving, but do you ever get hired to go around and fix all the knocked over junction boxes?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do. We straighten them out and make them right. We do a lot of maintenance. I think last year on maintenance, just for Lumen, we did over 40,000 work orders in the metropolitan area. So we do have some other yards within the metro, so that we're not running around the whole metro all the time. So, but this would be for the metro, kind of the home base where, we might do some engineering out of this location as well. And then just management and have some teams in there that are working inside the office that are doing project management from this location, and things like that. So that'd be the primary function.
So most of your workforce is out in the field doing the actual work.
Yeah, I hope.
Yeah. What do you anticipate as, the number of people in the office at this location?
To start with, we're just finishing off the lower level of there's going to be in the front part, the 200 feet by, I think it's 40 feet. That'll be, we'll have a training room in there because we do a lot of training, safety training. We're adamant about, giving a skill set too, so we do a lot of training for that also. And we do more of that out at our Clearwater location, in the field up there, training people for a career, right? Because we're a career-based company, so we try and, provide that for planning for careers for people. It's not just a job, it's a career. So, if you're going to do that, you have to have a facility like this to, bring them in and teach them about the, how to how to operate the equipment and or be safe out there. And safety is a big part of ours. So we do a lot of safety training. But did that answer your?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get, I had, sort of the all the time staff, maybe you're like a dozen people or?
Right now I see 30, 40 in the office, that 30-ish range probably, right around that 30.
Okay.
the field people, it could be, maybe it's 70 people work in the field that, but a lot of those people won't report to the office anyways.
Are these all new jobs?
Yeah, mainly new jobs in the community. That's why I like Dayton. I mean, I've been working Corcoran, Dayton, since 1985 doing this. And, it's a nice community and we hope we can be a part of it. So,
All right, thank you.
yep.
Anybody? I have no questions, no comments. Oh, go ahead.
One more thing we just wanted to address. So we would like to talk about the fees involved with this project, given its size, and relatively speaking, they're high, and we'd like you to consider some forbearance here to help make this project viable. And I've got John Roush, will introduce himself here, but he's got the history and information to give you some relativity here as to why we'd even ask you to consider this. Hopefully you'll think it's a reasonable request, but let me turn it over to John.
Well, thank you, guys. We're not asking for any gifts or anything out of the normal. We just want to bring another good client here to Dayton. We bought this land about 6-7 years ago. It was 77 acres at the time. And I think we're maybe approaching about $50 million in development with nVent, the steel company, Quick Trip came in, JA Glass. I also want to let you guys know that we did sell, and if you're willing to put up that wetland delineation, we sold the 16 acres to a guy named Brian Fitterer who used to own that mobile home park at the time.
John, I can make some copies here for you on
Oh.
here. Otherwise, I can pull up the GIS information if that works
Sure,
just as simple.
or just pass it around if you'd like, whatever works best. I'm sorry, I thought we had one of those. I still got a fax machine.
Sure, I'll pull this up.
Projector.
Yeah, sorry. But I guess what I wanted to share is when we sold that land to Brian Fitterer, it was guided for industrial at the time, so this might have been 6 years ago. He was thinking about expanding the mobile home park, but due to the wetland delineation, Kellogg Environmental went out and did a proper wetland delineation. And I've walked the site several times. There's a lot of ditches in there, and there's berms and slopes and things like that. And you'll see the wetland delineation that was done when they come back with copies. That will not be a concern to future residents, because you can't build in a wetland. So we'll see that here in a second. So sorry, I didn't come prepared with
Oh, that's
that.
all right.
I didn't realize that might be an objection. But just to put that to bed, maybe what we could do is just come back to that, if that's okay with you guys?
We're getting it. He's close.
You got it? Oh, there you go. Yeah, okay, thank you.
Down.
So this is GIS data done from a satellite. This wasn't the field verified stuff that went to your LGU, the local governing units over the wetlands. So you'll be able to see that from what they're passing around. Yeah.
Sorry.
And I'm glad that,
Stephanie was hoarding them all.
I was a stack. I got zoned in. I'm sorry.
so you can't build in a wetland. You have to have setbacks from a wetland. You guys can see there from the wetland delineation that was accepted by, again, the watershed city in the past, that there's wetlands in the area that this isn't accurate. The field verified one that you're looking at is, which was accepted by your watershed.
Okay.
So maybe, yeah, just for the record there. But I'm glad to speak to that if anybody's concerned about setback issues for any future residential there. The site,
John, can I just ask you one question?
Yes, sir.
This is an assumption on my part, but the concept plan delineated the wetlands. Was that based on this information?
yeah,
Okay, good.
absolutely, yeah. You can't just use this GIS
Right.
satellite imagery that,
It's a first start. It's not
that's
the
a good
last.
start, yes, yes. That's the final that you guys base your
Yeah.
decisions on, and all the DNR, federal government, everybody else, Army Corps. Jason, do you have anything to add to that?
It's a long list of people that look at them.
There we go.
To verify.
Thank you.
And they have been verified.
That's a very technical answer. So if we could, if anybody had any questions, I'd be glad to speak to that. But otherwise, maybe we could jump into the, did you guys get those exhibits that I sent to you earlier? And are you able to put them up by chance? What I was hoping you could do is you could start with this one that shows 7.164 acres of area.
I don't know how you.
We can't put it up. We just have paper.
Okay, I got paper. I brought copies of this.
Okay.
Is that okay to pass this out? All right. Let me just keep on.
One each or share?
We share.
We can share.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So what we'd like to talk about is how your fees are calculated in the city of Dayton. And the way that they're being calculated right now is based upon 7.164, let's call it acres of land. I'm not going to call it upland because there's ponds, there's federal drainage ways in there. Army Corps of Engineers will not let us get in those drainage ways because it goes into French Lake. And you have several steep slopes. Approximately 2.5 acres of steep slopes and drainage ways that are not going to be able to be utilized by Mark. The way that a lot of cities, and I could get you a list of them at some point if anybody would choose, Lakeville's one of them, by the way, considers, oh, you guys have this already.
Yeah, there's a small version of that one.
You want a big version? You can get it from John.
Well, now I have a big version.
Okay. A lot of cities will consider the steep slopes and retainage and stormwater retention ponds and the drainage ways, which go into French Lake, and these are the areas I think improve the water quality, but I guess the engineers are the ones that make us do this, so they'll speak to exactly how much clearer that makes it. There is a very nice, and I welcome you, if anybody's interested, to go out there. You have permission right now, the city council does anyway, and the staff, to go out and walk around the stormwater retention ponds. It was built for sure, otherwise the good Lord made a very flat, nice walking path around this stormwater retention area, which ultimately goes into French Lake. And I believe there's even a structure over there to keep, people from falling in or whatever. That takes away approximately, like I said, 2.5 acres off the total acreage of the parcel. The impact that has is significant within at least our world of development. And did anybody pass these out yet, the comparisons that we have done? Okay.
Oh, you did, John? John, did you pass it?
Oh, if I could, so I think John brings up a very good point. If, especially with this parcel, if you net out the developable acres, you save about 30% off the trunk fees. So our fee schedule has different units of measurement. So for trunk fees, it's based on gross acres. And I think what the developers are saying is that's not necessarily fair if you can't develop on all the land. If you net out the wetlands and the steep slopes.
Why don't we do it the same way we do with other development?
Try and get as much money as you can.
It's
not necessarily.
A little bit different. The fee schedule does net out wetland and floodplain.
Correct.
But it does not net out other water bodies or features that make it impractical to develop on, or steep slopes, for example. So
Can you give me some scotch tape to put it up on the wall, too?
the definition of buildable area is different for the fees than it is for the plating process itself.
So we had another business that was interested in being here about a year and a half ago, Quilling Roofing. He got substantially further than where Mark is at right now. And by the way, I'm not working for Mark. I'm the landowner trying to sell the land to Mark. So we tried selling this particular parcel that got to, I believe, final plat about 2 years ago to Jason Quilling Roofing out of Brooklyn Park. He was going to move up here, start his business. and it was great. He came to me at the end and he said, John, these fees are, I can't afford it. I'm not going to do the deal. I'm not moving this thing forward. Mark hasn't said that. He told me the fees were extremely high, and I asked how high. So we had somebody way smarter than me do an analysis here. Dayton is $529,000 in fees. The same building, if it was to be built in Blaine, would be $95,000. You give him my notes, which is 5.5 times less. In Rogers, if they went over to Rogers, and we hope they don't, that'd be 2.75 times less. I don't know what else he's looking at. If he is still looking, I hope he's not. I hope he just ends up coming here and paying all the fees to the city of Dayton. And by the way, we lowered the land price from the other properties we've sold. But that's an economic decision, and Mark's clearly a good businessman. He's going to hire 30 people. I hope he comes here. But all we're asking, we're not asking you to change your ordinance. We're asking you to kind of align the formula along with what other cities would do. Go ahead. Sorry.
One other data point I'd like to add, the nVent building to the north is 248,000 square feet. City fees on that project were around the 900,000 mark. I was actually involved with that with Capital Partners along with our civil engineers here in attendance. I think that's pretty close to being accurate. So that building is 10 times larger, and the fees are they're not even twice as much. So the fees on this are $540,000 versus $900,000 on a 248,000 square foot building, which is in line. So I don't know why it kind of happened this way, but the hardship on a smaller building like this, given what John said, plus even the example within the community, is quite a hardship. And I'm working with Mark, the owner, to put together the full pro forma on this, and we're trying to make this work. We want to make this work, but for whatever reason, it's a little bit of an anomaly because of the odd shape of this property and whatnot. So we're just asking for some forbearance, some help here to get us back in line with something that's really more reasonable.
And what it is, it's not necessarily the building, it's the site. It's these areas here that are in the pink that other cities would not count. And if he goes up to Rogers, I'm not sure if they'll count him or not. If he goes to Otsego, if he goes to Blaine, if he goes to other places, it's going to be the total cost of occupancy. The building costs the same for him to build here as it does in other places. So we're not asking you to change the fee schedule. If you did, that would be great, but we're not asking that. We just want you to, we're asking if you would align your formula with what a lot of other municipalities would do. Steep slopes and ponds and federal drainage ways that go into the lake to keep it clean are, what's that topic here? And we've got engineers, I know I've talked to Jason a little bit, Joe Raddick, Carlson McCain, you probably have over 50 years of engineering experience. And I said, guys, if we're asking for something unreasonable that every other city would say no to, tell me, and then I'm not going to come up here. And I didn't get that answer. So this is our last piece that we would like to sell, and it is inefficient because of these areas. That's why we haven't been able to sell it yet, and that's why our other guy left. So we're hoping to welcome him at the ribbon cutting. Not asking you to do anything right now, but if you had any questions, to the extent I could answer them, I sure would.
I think we understand the request.
Yep. Thank you for listening.
Could we just ask if you all think it's a reasonable request? We do, if we go through site plan approval, preliminary plat in August, which means we have to submit in the 1st of July, there's a substantial economic outlay for Mark to get us to even come to that. And we'd like to have some feeling if you're open to working with us on this, because we do have Mark's got to make a big economic decision here on architectural drawings, civil engineering drawings, applications very quickly. And, is that fair, Mark? Very fair. Just like to know what your initial thoughts are, at least.
I totally get that. Well, I can't speak for Stephanie, but we're in month 6? so this is the first time I've seen these kinds of numbers, so I'm going to have to sit on this, and I'm going to have a whole list of questions that I'll be sending to our city staff so that I can understand it better. So I don't feel comfortable at this point saying anything, but I totally get that you want an answer as soon as possible because you guys have a timeline, and yes, it's a huge chunk of money and you don't want to commit to it, but I need time to think on this, put my questions together, and get them to our engineer and our city staff.
It's going to be a common.
Yeah, fair enough.
We would need to talk
I don't know
to
what
staff and see what's going on.
the timing is exactly today, but the way we set the contract up was they wanted to get started this year. Of course, in Minnesota, December, January, February, nobody does anything, and hopefully people.
Well, you can, but it costs way more.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
You did not mischaracterize what I was also thinking.
Then may I ask?
Don't want to push you.
No, I appreciate all of the visuals and everything. It's honestly really helpful, the different steps there of, this one to this one. But yeah, I personally, I have a lot of questions I think I need to understand more of before I can come with an
Is it
opinion.
fair to say, so I guess I have two thoughts. Is it fair to say it's not a no? Is that fair to say?
I think it's fair to say it's not an immediate no.
I'm definitely not a no. I mean, my biggest concern is why are we so out of whack?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think that's where I'm
Okay, so
questioning
we're not considered unreasonable here.
No.
We appreciate that. I see Mark appreciates that.
I want to understand these numbers better.
Yeah, this.
So my second question then, this is on behalf of Mark. Obviously, July 1st is bearing down on us, and if we delayed a month, Mark, I know we haven't talked about this, you and I, but if we did delay a month, because he's got to decide quickly to spend, a big chunk of money. If we delayed a month, we could not have to make that decision quite yet, but maybe that'd give us some time to get some feedback from you all. Is that enough time to get some feedback?
Well, because July 1st is next week.
Right, I mean, we're...
That's a John.
Mayor and council, staff this is not the first project that has asked for a fee reduction, so staff is doing a comparison of our fees with other cities.
Yeah, I think these individual things are a bad idea, but if we are out of whack, then we should be looking at that. I think.
Yeah, we are different than every city around us, and every city's different, so it's,
Yeah,
how do we
it's just-
develop, how
this
do we
looks
go
like
about the
we're
process, what
really
was
out of
about
whack.
first?
It would be nice to get
We are already on
staff's
top of it.
opinion
Yep.
to us.
Yeah,
so.
I agree.
We're on top of getting, John's kind of taking the lead on getting other cities' comparisons, so we know where we're at.
Okay. Fair enough.
It's regional.
Well, I will provide it, or John and Hayden will provide some feedback as soon as we get some.
Very good. Thank you very much. May I just,
I have another
Mark, is there anything else
not
you
for
would
them,
like to
but
say
for us.
before we?
For John.
No, we
Just-
just appreciate any thought on it.
John, your 5.9 number, that's on the whole 8 point whatever acres, right?
Yes.
I can clarify.
Okay.
Well,
7.1.
the numbers that I provided in the email was based on the gross acreage or the net acreage of the concept plan that was provided. So that number that I provided does eliminate the wetland area. But to Mr. Mayor's point about why the city doesn't treat developable area in terms of trunk charges to maybe what the Met Council sees in terms of what is net density, that's something that we had talked about internally, and things like the steep slopes that are 18% or greater, the wetland buffer area, those areas that are designated already in the zoning ordinance to not be developable, to me, that seems like they could be considered to be netted out as well.
It feels reasonable, but.
The stormwater ponds, and now this is my professional opinion, the stormwater ponds are a little bit more tricky because those ponds wouldn't be there but for the development itself.
Correct. Yeah.
Well,
So,
except for the regional one, that is, collecting all, this one here.
You mean the shared one between the two sites?
What's that?
The shared one that's on the other side too?
Yeah, well, it goes, throughout the entire thing. That was there way before we got here. And it's collecting regional, I'm gonna call it regional, maybe the wrong terminology.
Well, it's a pre-existing, I think what Hayden's alluding to is anything that's constructed to support the development, so any
Yeah.
new proposed ponds.
Right, okay. Agreed. And we can sell, like, I wouldn't be disputing that. If it's a stormwater pond as part of his development, if you took a 10-acre field of all upland, you're going to have to create a pond there. We're not disputing that at all. That, he should pay for that, we should pay fees on that, that's fine. If it's taking water from other places and it was there before we got here, that's what we're asking you to consider.
And just the overall relativity of the difference in these fees, just in general, is pretty substantial. And however you come to that is, your bailiwick, not ours, but relatively speaking, it's substantial. And it's a hardship.
And in this situation, the fees are approaching the sales price. So we got to make a decision as to, if this doesn't work, what we do next, I guess. Could be a park, who knows? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Stephanie, did you have something?
I can talk to him offline.
Anybody else have any?
I need some education.
Did you get what you need?
Yes, sir.
All right, let's move on to. Okay. Yeah, come on.
Keith Grover again, 113th and Fernbrook. Being the old guy in the room and having grown up in this neighborhood and actually camped as a kid in the woods that used to be where these projects are all going, the pond that you have marked as existing pond is not a naturally occurring pond. It's an oxidation pond from the original sewage treatment plant, or lack of treatment, that the trailer court had.
Yeah.
So I'm just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that, and if you were, if the project was planning on running stormwater into that, I would ask our engineers to really look carefully at, because I don't think they ever took that out. The high dam, let me point it out to you quick here. This line of trees right here is actually the dam that was built when I was like 11 or 12 years old to create the sediment pond for the treatment plant at the trailer court.
Yeah.
I think that's the only piece of property or piece of land that's left there that actually has any kind of a steep bank to it. And it's steep because it's a man-made dam, an earthen dam. The center of the property has all been leveled off because that was a hill we used to slide on with toboggans as a kid. It's all flat now, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood it. And if that's something that we need to look at, that at least you were aware of it, so. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, on to F.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My end is pretty short for how long it took to walk up here. So this is, the intention here is to appoint a planning commission member for the term that ends June 30th, 2028. We did have 6 applicants that applied for it. Advertisement, or I should say the vacancy was posted on the city's app, on the webpage, and on Facebook. We did receive 6 applications.
Okay. So we'll have at it.
Mayor, council, thank you.
Who,
We'll stand for any questions, is that better?
I have my top 2.
why don't you go ahead?
Okay. My top 2 are Suzanne and Keith. I think they bring, in particular, they both bring some historical knowledge that I think is lacking, I guess, for the River Planning Commission. I think they both bring some unique perspectives. Suzanne in particular, I really like having had experience on city council and also as city staff, and being on Met Council, the transportation plan, I believe it was. Now, I will admit, I was looking at this when I was dying of heat over the weekend, but it was the Met Council, I thought it was their transportation plan for a few years. Yes, so I just think they both, like I said, I think they both bring a historical perspective that is sorely needed. I think they would be disruptors, which I also think are sorely needed, and bring some unique experience. Those are my top two.
I had two also. I had looked at Keith for similar reasons. He clearly shows an interest. And Daniel, because we had looked at him last time, and I think he came in kind of close to the top, but he does have a lot of experience, so those were my two.
And clarified, it was for Suzanne, the Transportation Advisory Board for Met Council. She served on that for 3 years. So that would be a very interesting perspective, particularly coming into our 2050 comprehensive plan.
Anybody else want to?
Well, I'm in about the same place with Sarah. Certainly Keith has shown an ongoing interest in our activities here. They're not applying as a couple, that would be just Keith, right? Just asking.
Marcia might find out it's not all peaches and cream.
Sorry. That's the risk. And Suzanne as well, because of her local experience and also some experience with other planning activities around the metro area. So those would be my two as well. And for some similar reasons, I think that although the vacancy is created by somebody who is in the business, okay, our planning commission, and I think rightfully so, is dominated by people that are in the business.
Yeah.
We need people with technical expertise.
Oh, absolutely.
To be able to guide our decisions here ultimately. But I do think it's been good to have somebody from the community, more from the neighbor perspective on the committee, and then doesn't bring the technical expertise to the committee the same way some of the other folks can, but sort of the real world perspective on things, I think, has helped us come to some better decisions over the last few years that I've been around this, and so that's where I'm coming to with those two.
Okay. Who's next?
Well,
go ahead, Scott.
Let's see. How do I do this?
Just spew it.
Heads or tails? I'm kind of stuck on Daniel. Only my biggest thing that I see is this is no slam on nobody. I just think we lack experience. Now, history, one would either take Keith or Suzanne. Because nobody's going to top Keith for sure. I'm stuck on Daniel just because of the background, and it's the professional, technical items that David was talking about. That's where I'm at. I guess if I had to pick one.
What if you had to pick two?
Huh?
Well, do I get to go?
We only need
Go ahead.
I also was impressed by Daniel's, I won't say resume, but application, thank you. I mean, I appreciated the little kind of cover letter overview, and then again, I agree with Scott that some of that long-term planning expertise and experience, I think, is important. So yeah, he was my top pick.
My counter is kind of with Dave is the technical experience is already present on the council with the commission, with the other 4 people. What's lacking is the long-term community experience. There is a lot of technical expertise already in that group.
I mean, I hear you, and this is not a stab at Keith at all, because I think you have a lot of really wonderful insight. And there is something to be said for someone who's been in the community and can say, oh yeah, like you said, I remember when I was a little young boy. My husband has a lot of those stories too, so I can appreciate that viewpoint. But I guess maybe I'm a little more forward and thinking. I don't know how to say what I'm trying to say. I appreciate your viewpoint, and I do think that there is a place for that, but I don't know, I still think that Daniel's my choice. Sorry.
So it looks like, you guys can double check me
Looks
here,
like
but
a 3-pick.
looks like there's, Keith's got 3 votes and Daniel's got 3.
You got it.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
So,
it's a swing. Oh, okay, that's right.
You got your coin?
The mayor.
You're
The mayor's a swing.
Oh, you gotta do it all on your own.
there's gotta be another
Don't
way
you
to
just
do
love that spot?
It's a good spot.
It is a good spot.
Not always. Okay, so you that had just one name picked out. Do you have any, well, I'm not sure how to do this. I really hate that you guys are doing this.
It's up to you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, mine were kind of 50-50, but I'll go with Keith. So, I know he's applied for this position a couple of times. Be gentle with the group.
If I can make a suggestion, we
Go
need a
ahead.
motion and a second.
Yeah.
I make a motion to appoint Keith.
I'll second.
More discussion. All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any, all those against say
I
no.
don't know that I say no.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that. I'm not a no.
Well, you gotta pick one.
Yes,
You
no,
can
or
be- you can be
abstain.
no.
Or abstain.
You can abstain.
You kind of have to have a reason to abstain.
You should, but just saying there's technically a third choice.
No, my reason is it'd be my second or third choice. There you go.
I agree.
Because I don't
Okay,
want
so
to make
you
a
wanna be
choice,
a-
I'm going to abstain.
So
I'm
you
not
could-
really
You
abstaining.
could be a nay or a, either way
A
it
nay's
passes.
fine. I don't care.
Doesn't matter.
Sure, we'll say
It
yay.
doesn't matter.
Well, I'll vote
It's-
yes,
it's
it's
done.
fine.
Oh, he said nay.
He said nay.
He
He's not
said
gonna-
no?
Yeah.
He said no.
Yep.
You can say
I could say no. I'll say no. Sorry, Keith.
But it's 3-2.
Either way.
It passes.
I'm not going to cry over it or nothing.
Okay.
Sure.
So it's 3-2.
You might get sick of it in a week.
For-
Those meetings are about 5-6 hours, by the way.
They do.
This meeting's gonna be 5
Okay.
or 6 hours.
All right. G.
Okay.
Congratulations.
Yeah, congratulations.
All right, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, tonight you're asked to consider Resolution 41-2025, variance at 11250 East French Lake Road. If you recall this property at all, the last month's meeting, there was, or it might have been 2 months meetings ago. This property was subject to a fire where an accessory structure was lost in total, and subsequently, the applicant is requesting a variance to rebuild the structure to its previous height and footprint. Essentially, the variance request is related to the need to exceed the height of the principal building. When we went out there on site as staff, we found that there was no portions of the building that would have allowed to otherwise build what was proposed. So this was the route that the applicant has gone for your consideration. So the total height in excess of the single-family home is roughly 1.5 feet. I think in the resolution, it's more, I think it's left at 2 feet for a little bit of rough estimates. But just a note back to the zoning ordinance requirements, because this property or this accessory structure was an existing nonconformity, lost to a fire that lost over 50% of its value. The property owner did have 180 days to apply for a building permit to build back existing. And at the point that he had reached out to the city staff about what he needed to do, that 180 days had lapsed. Here's a picture of the site from April.
And that 180 days, that's from state statute, is that right?
Correct, yes. And I did reach out to the League of Minnesota Cities to see if there was any flexibility to that, and they said that there was not. Here's just a general view. This is a 2019 street view that shows you what you would expect to see from the street. A very similar build. Essentially, the applicant has stated that the reasoning for the excess height or the need for that height is related to storage of a private or personal camper that could not meet or get through the garage doors with a 14-foot sidewall. So the proposed structure has 16-foot sidewalls, allowing for, I believe, a 14-foot tall garage door. Just for reference, some questions have come up on how the city code defines building height, and you can see here by this diagram, it is basically the lowest elevation point of the building wall to the median height of the roof. So it would be the average from where essentially the end is to the peak. So that's how that is measured for those types of roof structures. And this was discussed at the Planning Commission meeting as well, but it actually opened up a little bit of a dialogue related to how the residential districts offer more flexibility in this regard than the ag districts, as the residential districts are offered to apply for a conditional use permit to exceed the height of their principal structures. At this point, the ag districts does not offer that same latitude, so that was where the variance route came from. And here's just reference. The setbacks would all be met with the property. There's no concerns related to the curb cut on the property or the material that is used for a driveway entrance, as this is a property that is zoned ag. The apron is asphalt, and I believe the remainder of the area is gravel that leads up to the doors. Just through our review, this was in the staff report as well, but through our review, we do go through a 3-step process guided by state statute to justify variances in this regard. The Planning Commission had a discussion about this. Staff doesn't believe that there is any conflicts or any issues related to consistency with the comp plan or altering the essential character of the locality. We had a neighbor representative of the area show up to the public hearing and state that this is not something that is out of the ordinary and would not otherwise be against it. But ultimately, the Planning Commission unanimously approved that the plight of the property was related to the lapse of the 180-day window. I don't know if that was this didn't really get addressed, but I wanted to just note that I don't know if it was specifically related to the lack of knowledge of the 180-day clause in the zoning ordinance, or if it was connected to the property owner, and this was not something that was addressed, but potentially the property owner purchased this property with this existing structure on it, not knowing that it was a non-conforming structure as part of the zoning ordinance. Though that information typically is called out if a zoning letter is ever requested when properties are purchased or for sale. I basically already summarized the Planning Commission's decision. And if the City Council finds that there's sufficient evidence to recommend approval, staff really does recommend that the City Council direct staff to address that discrepancy or potential discrepancy if you find it to be in the code. There are a couple options that were laid out for you in the staff report. just because of the very large dynamic between conforming ag properties and non-conforming ag properties related to size, staff would recommend that we would mimic the residential district requirements, allow them to build a structure no taller than their house. But if they chose to do so, they could apply for a conditional use permit not to exceed 35 feet. So that would be my recommendation moving forward if the council sees fit. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
I don't remember what the planning commission discussion was, but I'm kind of of the opinion if it's ag, we should just say 35 feet.
Yeah.
Not worry about the primary structure.
Correct.
Because a lot of these places are ramblers it just doesn't make sense to me.
And it shouldn't matter, like, if you
primary
had a
structure.
two-story house, we wouldn't be having this conversation at
Yeah.
all, which
Yeah.
is what's so ridiculous. I think either A, mirror what is in residential, because it should not be less restrictive for building an outbuilding in residential than it is in ag. That's ridiculous. Or just let it be 35 feet regardless of the size of the house in ag. I would be okay with either of those options.
If I could just clarify, I think that one of the main reasons that the conditional use permit is there is mainly in opportunity for the planning commission and the city council to consider if there are any nuisance problems that could be created for a structure that is taller than the principal dwelling, given the setbacks of accessory structures are much less than the principal dwellings on the property, whether that is related to casting a shadow on a building wall that's adjacent to that property or whatever it may be. It gives the city council and the planning commission just a little bit of an opportunity to say, how is this going to affect the surrounding area?
That's fair.
Now, if this really does get into the weeds again, but if there is an accessory structure that is approved for ag use, I wanted to clarify with the mayor about at the planning commission meeting. I did go back and look through some information. And while the building code is exempt for ag buildings, the zoning ordinance is not. And a lot of the times I've seen that communities will not require a building permit, but at least have a form for them to fill out that basically allows us to certify that that building is in compliance with the zoning ordinance. We don't have that in place right now, but that would be something that could be considered just to call that out and make sure. With that being said, where I was going with that original point was that if there is a ag building that is dedicated for ag use only, consideration may be given to the height difference. But at the same time, the ag use is ag use at its time, and there's no...
You can't guarantee it.
You can't guarantee that the
Yourself.
property or the ag building is going to continue to be an ag use throughout its time being there on the property. So those are a couple of the things that I just wanted to note.
And thinking on also how many of we have a lot of land currently zoned ag that is non-conforming and are actually pretty small lots. So actually, I take it back. I want to go with the same as residential.
That was going to be my one comment to mayor and council, is that we have a lot of properties that are just generically classified as ag.
But
So,
are
and I don't want to call them out,
realistically-
like the growers, because they're sitting in the audience here, they have a very small property. They're still ag. They're
Yeah.
considered ag. So if they want to put up a 35-foot building based on that code, that seems a little excessive.
That's
to
fair.
me,
Okay,
But
so-
it doesn't mean that they don't want to. I just.
Same rules, so I'm going back. Same rules as residential.
And just to note as well on the conditional use permit process, conditional use permits differentiate from variance requests, as you have to identify a practical difficulty on the site. Now, I will just say that the conditional uses, if you can meet those guidelines identified for the conditional use permit, essentially the conditional use is presumed allowed.
Yeah.
But it just offers that a little bit of a,
Just a little check.
they're not as complicated to review, is what I'm getting at.
And you brought up a good point about, like, I would be real annoyed if my neighbor built a giant building right up as close to the property line as possible and kept my house in shade all day long, practically. Like, that would not be cool, so. And some of those ag properties are virtually residential size lots, so. Okay.
Anybody else have any comments?
But as far as this one is, I'm fine with saying
Right.
variance.
I think
The variance, I mean, yes,
the
the
goal is to
variance.
find a way to allow this.
Yes.
And, but rather than do it as a variance, again, I would rather see us change
The code.
the code to allow. I hadn't thought about it as, just setting a height, and I think that makes a lot of sense for the ag properties that we have that are still ag properties. Nobody's gonna build, nobody builds a conventional barn anymore, but I can't imagine that
They're
any of those
expensive.
weren't taller than the houses they were next to.
Oh, they always were.
And so it seems like we're, denying history in that context. But we do have a lot of property. I mean, my house was zoned ag up until a year or two ago. And, so there's a lot of that in Dayton. It's in some kind of transition. So I would be more comfortable, I guess, with the CUP process. Make the language the same as residential. That seems to work.
Are you talking about this property, or are you talking about fixing?
Fixing
Yeah,
the
fixing
ordinance, adding the language that we've got in the residential
Yes, yeah.
to allow a CUP for this kind of variance.
Right.
I guess we wouldn't call it variance anymore, but this kind of use.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that would be my preferred.
Scott?
I support that.
Okay. Got what you need?
I do.
Do we need to make a motion on this
Yep.
variance?
Yes.
Yep, on the variance we do.
I make a motion to approve the variance?
Second.
What?
Did we miss something?
Just try and catch up.
No. Hi, Mayor and Council. I guess I have a question. What is the reason for the variance allowance?
Well,
So-
you can change the ordinance before this shed goes up.
I'm
You're gonna
just
fix
trying to
it.
make sure I understand why we're approving the variance, not because I don't disagree with it. I want to make sure
The
we know
reasoning
reason
for the minutes.
why, we are approving the variance.
I am, because I agree with the reasons. I think the 180-day thing would hit 99% of the population.
Working with insurance is a nightmare.
I don't know if we want to use that as, I'm going to look at the city attorney now, because I don't know if we want to use that as a reason to approve a variance, only because it goes against
State
state statute and previous.
I think the statutes.
I'm not saying that I don't disagree with.
What's an
the
acceptable reason? Like, if that's not
That's what I mean. I don't know.
Okay.
Without changing the code, which again, I don't disagree, is the basis of the problem. I don't know if there is a reason. That's what I'm.
And we have to have a reason? We can't just say?
Yeah.
Okay, a legitimate question.
You're supposed to have a reason for why. And the reason for that is so
By
we
who?
have some basis for why the variance is being, because otherwise it could be.
Oh, the next person that we
It's a
gave this
precedent.
one. Okay,
It's a
I hear you
precedent.
now.
Okay, well, this person didn't meet the 180 days, so now it's the
Previous one.
presumption of knowing the law, which is the basis of the legal that I have from.
Do
decision.
does
Again, I'm not trying to
not-
disagree and throw a wrench in thing, I just
No,
want to make sure we're
that's
doing
fair.
things.
That's your job,
Properly.
is to make sure we're doing our job properly. So I appreciate that.
Does not, if our intent is to change the language in the zoning, does not approving the variance then cause some hardship in this case?
I'm going to look at the city attorney.
Well, it depends on what you mean by hardship. Do you mean just inconvenience as to
I guess
timing
so,
for the
yeah.
applicant? Or do you mean the legal concept of hardship under the statute?
No.
How do we get him to build the shed?
Right.
Mayor, members of the council, I think Zach is reflecting some thoughts that I gave to staff earlier when I was reviewing the packet and just, asked some questions and raised some concerns about the three-part test for the findings for a variance. I think if the council is inclined to change the ordinance, and that can happen, in a reasonable amount of time and doesn't unduly delay the project for the applicant, then I think a code amendment would be a better way to proceed, rather than approve this variance as applied, because, the fact that the 180 days requirement is there, it is in your code right now, and you can't pretend that it's not. And so, I mean, whether it was because the applicant didn't know about the 180-day requirement or because he was unaware that his building was a nonconformity, those are, the legal test in the statute is about the property, not about process. So, I mean, it's kind of splitting hairs, it's kind of being hyper-technical, but under the requirements of the statute, it's really hard to say from a legal perspective that he meets that test for a variance.
So the code needs to be changed and this needs to be approved as a CUP.
If that's what the council is inclined to do, to amend the code to allow for this building to go forward as planned, then that's probably, from a legal perspective, the better way to go, yes.
My problem is, and I'm trying to get back to where you had, what page did you have the three tests?
In the report?
On the packet.
In the packet.
Well, what version of the packet?
I've got 99
Here's my problem. The hardship is in ordinance, we have this 180-day thing, right?
And it's also in the state statute.
It's also in the state statute, but it is one that
We ourselves have.
we ourselves have, and we have no control over that statute. Because it sounds like, or our ordinance, it sounds like, why do we even have that ordinance if state statute already trumps it?
Well, it doesn't necessarily trump it, it's just that because of the way that the way that the ordinance is written,
Yep.
the way it's currently written, it has, it imposes that same statutory deadline, but for a variance.
Yep.
But if you had a different tool that could get an applicant to where they wanted to go, like the CUP, and you change the requirements,
Okay,
then you're still complying with the statute, because you're not talking about a variance anymore.
My problem is I think our ordinance is unreasonable.
And
Now-
that's why I'm suggesting that an amendment to the ordinance is the better route to go.
Okay, I'm not, the 180 days is unreasonable. We have that mandated to us, so we can't change that, or we could remove it, right?
For variances, yes. I mean,
Forget about it.
if you are requiring a variance in any situation,
Yeah.
or in any zoning code, or in any zoning district.
Here, let me start over.
Sorry.
You're wondering why for the redundancy in the ordinance?
If it's in state statute?
Yes.
Why do we
So-
also have it
So
in our
there's two
ordinance?
things. One is, we have it in there, it's redundant with state statute.
Right.
If we didn't have that in there, would this be an issue? If we did not have the 180-day limit in there, would this be an issue?
You would still have to comply with the statute for granting a variance.
We would have to make sure it complies with the state statute?
Yes.
Since when?
I don't know of a situation where you can, because I could, we can take a deep dive into the
No, we
concept
don't
of
wanna take a
preemption.
deep dive.
I mean, basically the state statute occupies the field of regulation in this situation. So
Sure.
unless there's a specific provision in the statute that says cities can be less restrictive, then you can't be less restrictive in your regulation. And so, and if there's been, cases or, court decisions where it's been interpreted that, it was kind of implied that the legislature meant to allow for cities to or local government units to be, less restrictive than the state statute, but that doesn't exist here. So the state statute sets the legal test for a variance. And so
Yes.
the reason why as I understand it, the reason why the variance was applied for here is because he wants the higher height, but it's the timing that makes the legal test difficult to reach.
Right. Had he met that 180-day, it would have just been issued. Correct?
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
because of the nonconformity. So, and that's the fact that's different here than when you're granting a variance in a different context. It's the fact that this was a non-conforming structure
Yes.
prior to the fire.
And but to me, it gets back to the 180-day window. He couldn't meet that for one reason or another.
He could have.
Yeah.
I mean, even while you're dealing with insurance, I mean, I mean,
I understand that.
theoretically
I'm just
possible.
saying, I think it's an unreasonable requirement, that 180-day. And it's driven from the state.
Right. So amend your ordinance to be what you think is reasonable in this context.
But we can't exceed the 180 days.
See,
That's what we've been told. That's why I want to.
Right, that's why you have to rewrite it, so it's a CUP, and then you can grant that.
Right, so if you amend the code, then you're not, then you wouldn't be, then the application wouldn't be for a variance any longer. So that state statute or 180 days, whether it's the ordinance or the statute, wouldn't apply anymore because he's not asking for a variance any longer.
I think to the mayor's point, I'll try to clarify for you, man. I think you're more saying, well, then we don't want the 180 days. We want it to be 365 or however many days it can be, whatever.
Yeah, but-
or remove the window totally and just say whatever it is.
And well, if the
But you
state
can't.
already covers it, then we should be able to.
Remove it from because it doesn't matter.
We should
It's-
be able to remove it from our code, however, the 180 days still stands
Still
because it's
stands.
coming down from the state.
Yes.
Right. But we
Yes.
don't need to say it in our code, because then when the state does change it, now we're not correct in our code.
Yeah.
And we
Right,
always see
so
that.
you couldn't adopt an ordinance that said 120 days.
I-
But if you had an ordinance that didn't say anything, then you would just be operating under the requirements of the state statute.
Yes.
Or reference the state statutes.
The reason it's in our zoning ordinance is because we are the local authority that has to enforce it, just like a variance request too. The three-part test is included in state statute as well, but we also have it adopted in our zoning ordinance because we are the local authority that authorizes or enforces
Right.
those sections.
Even if it's redundant,
right.
that's very standard. And I'm sure there are lots of other examples of where your code mirrors state statute in all kinds of other ways.
So I'm gonna make a note, I'm gonna make a motion that we amend the code, have this gentleman apply for it through a CUP so that he can build his program.
Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Legally?
Yep.
Then I'll second that.
Just it depends on how fast staff can turn it around, though. That's the
You
question.
can turn around for the second meeting, planning commission and council in the second meeting in July. I would say, like, you still need to make action, take action on the variance application.
Yeah, so you'd have to deny the variance application,
Or-
direct staff to do the CUP process for the code. It would essentially, and I hate to delay the applicant because I know he's on a timeline too, but it would essentially be a 30-day delay essentially. Because we pass the code and the CUP for the applicant on July 22nd.
You'd have to have a public hearing.
Because you have to have a public hearing.
Correct.
Yep.
Yes, okay.
Which we could do
So
a
he
public-
can't start, he can move dirt or whatever he's gotta do and get started, right?
You just can't go anything vertical. Yep.
I don't know if that helps, but we got a whole development going in that isn't approved, so maybe it should be.
It just seems like every variance we've ever approved is subjective, so.
Yeah, like I said, I just want to make sure
It
that.
is.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, every variance is unique because you have to look at the specific circumstances and apply it, and apply the three-part test to the specific circumstances. So every single one of them is different. And because of the discretion that the council has with variances, it is a little bit more subjective than a CUP.
What I just
We
want to
can do
do
both.
is just ask an attorney, and then you just still don't have an answer.
What?
We can do both of these things, correct? Approve the variance and
Yes, but the
Right.
question is,
For the-
what's the reasoning for approving the variance? Like, what's your
just
grounds?
expediency on getting this problem solved.
Which could be causing more problems.
I'm not necessarily in favor of it, I'm just saying that, I'm just asking the question, can we do both?
Oh,
Yeah.
Yes.
The
That's
council
what I-
can technically
that's what I
do
was
anything.
about to do.
It's just, that's why
Technically, I motioned and Scott seconded, and it
You
hasn't
did.
been pulled off the table.
it is not.
So, yes, you could vote to approve the variance on the findings that the planning commission made and recommended. Does it meet the test, the legal test perfectly? I would say no. Is it going to be legally, is someone going to challenge it? Probably not. So, I mean, it's a decision that is within your discretion to make on the variance and then do the code amendment, or you can do the code amendment, run it concurrent with an amended application from a variance to a continued, to a conditional use permit.
This has to go through planning, and are they having a meeting next month?
July.
July 10th.
Okay. Well, like Sarah says, we have a motion and a second.
You have 2 motions and 2 seconds.
Yeah, which one are you talking about?
Technically, could there be?
Oh, we did, yeah.
Second?
No,
You can't make a second motion when there's an open motion on the floor.
right.
That's
So
correct.
that second one from Scott was
Dead.
Is nullified.
That'll die?
it never should have happened.
Okay, let's pretend it didn't happen.
So which motion is on the table?
The first one I made, which was to approve the variance. And then Scott seconded, and then Zach made a hunt noise, which made me pause to say, "Why are you unhappy?" Which led to this whole conversation.
So we're not amending the code then, or we are?
Well, that wasn't.
We are.
We are, but we don't need to make a motion to do that. That's
Okay, so right now, the motion is to approve the variance.
yes.
Yes.
And as our
And-
legal counsel and staff have pointed out, we don't have. We in the motion, I did not give any reasons for approving the variance.
Well, if Mr. Mayor, if I may, I would
Go ahead.
ask that the motion be amended to the point that you do need to make findings.
Yeah.
And so that if the motion could be amended to approve the variance based on the findings proposed and approved by the Planning Commission.
Based on the findings in said resolution.
Right,
From the
I mean, do you
Planning
have a resolution?
It's in the packet, yeah.
So there is a resolution?
Yes, and it's
Okay, well,
numbered.
then you would vote to approve the resolution.
Okay.
Sorry, I only printed part of the packet, sorry.
So you had the initial motion?
Yes, I did.
You still okay with that?
I was still okay with it as long as we all know the consequences of it.
They're just providing information.
Yes.
So I want to make sure the council has.
And Scott had a second.
Yes.
I'm delaying until
To
Scott.
tell Scott returns, yes.
Do we have more discussion? So this is to.
So it would be a motion to approve Resolution 41-2025
Yep.
for a
Yes.
variance at 11250 East French Lake Road, based on the findings enumerated in the resolution.
Yes.
Go ahead.
That would be your motion.
So
Yes, that's my motion. Thank you for summarizing my
Really?
motion.
I still think we need to do the second thing next. You know, and I'll just say, I don't love variances,
Yeah.
but in this case, I will get past my hesitancy because at the end of the day, this guy is just asking to build back what he already had. And this is not some new groundbreaking, something or other that we've never looked at before. He had a pole barn and he wants to build another pole barn that hopefully will look a little nicer than the color scheme on the last one, but since I don't pick colors, that's not an official comment.
And if he were
think
in a
we-
residential district, it wouldn't have been this much of a hassle.
There's another path, so there's
And
a
if
bunch
he
of
had a
anomalies here.
two-story building house, which is a reasonable size house, this wouldn't be an issue.
Does Scott have a second? Sorry.
Did you?
You guys still beating that to death?
We're waiting for
No,
you.
you weren't here.
You just
So the
Do you have
motion has been
No,
amended
I'm good to go.
be a motion to approve Resolution 41-2025 for a variance at 11250 East French Lake Road, based on the findings of the Planning Commission enumerated in the resolution.
That's what you seconded. You seconded that.
That was the first one.
Yes, that was the first one.
All right.
We
So
amended the initial
any more
motion.
discussion?
We had to wait for your second, official.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no. It's approved. All right.
Mr. Mayor, members of the
You
council,
stay around
I've got
for
the
a couple
direction
hours
I
if you
need
want.
for,
Well, you sorry, what was that?
I've got the direction that I need to
We'll do a
bring
quote.
an amendment to the planning commission.
Yeah.
Please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item H,
Who may I have? half-hour meeting schedule.
Mayor and council, this is application for a preliminary plat and site plan review for Skanel. It's located, I'm going to say the nearest intersection would be Territorial and I think it's Holly Lane. This project previously was applied for in, I believe it was 2022 and approved. Because of change in the market, the project was not built and the application's expired and has since been applied again. The primary difference between the current application and the 2022 plan is that the building has been flipped around. So what's being applied for or being requested is a spec office warehouse building with limited outdoor storage behind the building facing the railroad tracks and County Road 81. When this was discussed at the Planning Commission, I'll note that in the staff report in the packet, their outdoor storage is now allowed along arterial streets, which includes County Road 81. The Planning Commission felt that it was acceptable in this case. For one, in between 81 and the property, it is railroad tracks, not necessarily road right-of-way. Also, it is a smaller area. And the Planning Commission did recommend, not officially, but verbally recommended that the trailer storage area be shifted as far west as possible or as far west as practical. I'm trying to summarize this quickly. So again, the intent here is a spec industrial building. It's a preliminary plat and site plan review. The Planning Commission did have some comments on the color scheme of the rear doors so that they be more similar to the building colors so that they don't stick out so much. But the applicant is here, and otherwise I can answer any questions that the council may have.
Any questions? I got none.
I second the comment about if we can get the doors to fade into the building a little bit more, that would help, and as much screening as physically possible, I would be appreciative of it. But I was looking at the plan. I don't see how they're going to move those trailer spaces based on the topography. I don't see how that is physically possible. But I'm not an engineer, so those are my only comments.
Anybody else?
The tree inventory, is that trees that are on the property, or is that what we're planting?
Oh, thank you. I did have one other thing.
So there is required to be a tree inventory of trees that are on the property.
Okay.
Predominantly, this is farmland.
Oh, I get that. I'm just looking at this tree list, and why would you want to plant box elder trees? Or apple trees?
Because they're cheap?
No.
I know.
Well,
Yeah, 20 years.
And then my only other question is we are asking them to put 1,362 shrubs in this thing?
Yes.
That was my,
Huh?
yeah.
At some point,
Can we fix that?
like the parking thing, it seems like we should look at this again, because then, just seems like requiring that many shrubs is,
Asinine?
Yeah.
They're going to die.
or maybe
Like, you
do
can't put
something
that
along
many
the lines
shrubs
of-
in the amount of space. They're literally on top of each other.
Well, sure, you
Plants
can't.
need to grow.
You can, but I
Well,
mean,
they're gonna
it just
die.
seems like a lot of trees. Or
It
shrubs,
just seems
sure.
like we should maybe
We're killing that to
examine
death,
that
I
again
think.
at some point.
I mean, and we're putting no ornamental trees, we're required to put 40, or 92, but we're okay with putting none. Why not a couple of flowering crabs or something that in May it looks nice or whatever. I mean, there's no rhyme or reason for that.
So we do have ordinance requirements for the number of plantings that are required. So trees,
Yes.
different types of
Let's work on
trees
that
and
one, too.
shrubs and ornamental trees. If you'd like, we can revisit that section in the ordinance.
Yes, specifically the shrubs, because this is not the first time the
Yeah,
ridiculously
it is
high
not.
amount of shrubs has come up. And it is ridiculous.
And if you'd like ornamental trees instead, the council needs to make that noted for the applicant.
I think you could
I
have a
thought they
couple
were
in there.
required.
They're
Yes,
required,
the
92 of them.
landscaping plan is
Yeah.
compliant with the number of shrubs.
No, yeah, but the ornamental trees,
Yeah, that is what it's missing.
yeah.
So
And
like,
they know that's
we're
missing.
looking for the council to give that.
I'm not saying we need 92 of them, but 5 or 6 would be okay.
That's, yep, that's great
I'd
direction.
give up 1,000 bushes or shrubs for 5 or 6 ornamental trees.
I'm not saying to get rid of all of the shrubs. 1,000 just seems like overkill.
So it's 1,362. Okay. Work with those numbers. That's crazy.
Would the council like to see 1,000 shrubs removed and 92 ornamental trees added?
Trying to
That's
find
a
the exact
1/10
numbers.
reduction. Council,
I'm looking for my numbers.
that's fine. It's just-
There they are.
It's 14 acres, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Put 20 ornamental trees and 500 shrubs. I'm good with that. Pick a number and just go with it.
I mean, even if you did
Amy,
600
give me your
shrubs.
2 cents worth.
How many people with shrubs, Amy?
This is how he makes decisions. It's close enough.
I would like to see some ornamental trees. I'm not saying there need to be 92. So let's say, I'm going to say about half. So 45 ornamental trees, and let's cut the shrub down. Right now, what's required is 1,362. Let's cut that down to 700, which I still think is too high.
If I could make a
Okay, yes.
none of us are landscape architects.
No, we're not.
If we can have the applicant.
For that reason, right
Yes.
The applicant's landscape architect probably work out a plan.
Yes.
My interpretation from the council is you're supportive of more than 0 ornamental trees
Correct.
and less than 1,300 shrubs.
Yes. And
Sounds
I
good.
think we need to revisit our own ordinance that came up with 1,300 shrubs as the reasonable number of shrubs. Because that's insane.
That's why we're
You
so
just
busy
said what I
making
wanted
anything done.
to say, John, is that I'm not comfortable looking at that two-dimensional drawing and saying, here's the right number of shrubs or trees for this site. There are people that do this professionally, and I think that our numbers probably are not reasonable, but I don't want to give up on the idea that we want nice-looking properties.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Right, but I can't pick a number to make that real by
a good point.
by looking
John.
at this. So I think that what I would say for me anyway is that I'm open, we're open, to a plan that does not meet our ordinance, but has
Meets the
complied with the
intent.
spirit of what we're trying to achieve, and that's
Mhm.
nice-looking properties.
And to screen it as much as possible from 81.
Yeah, that's part of it. 1,300 shrubs or something. How to do the job.
That would screw.
Problem is shrubs don't.
The problem is
They
shrubs
only-
only get this
They only
tall.
grow 3 feet high.
Yeah.
And with that many, half of them will die.
Okay.
But my other question around this, and I know we talked about it a little bit at the EDA meeting, but if I'm remembering this right, this property had some TIF applied to it.
That's the
Proposed
second.
Next
application.
Next item.
Next item, okay, then, never mind.
Okay, so I will need a motion and a second.
I'll motion that to do what we just talked about.
With the.
Officially.
Yeah.
What he said.
I'll second.
Okay,
With the understanding that a tree shrub,
will be agreed upon.
Will be agreed upon.
I'll wordsmith it.
thank you.
Okay, any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Motion carries 5-0. On to item I.
Mayor, members of council, this is the TIF related to the previous preliminary plat and site plan review you just did on the Dayton Interchange building. We have Jason Arsvold here from Ellers. He's going to run through the PowerPoint, and I'll stand for any questions. Take it away, Jason.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, members of the council. We are here to talk about potential TIF for this last project that you discussed. Just a couple of items here that we'll review. I won't go into too much detail here about the project because we just got done talking about it. You're all familiar with where it is and what it is. But a little bit of background, I think as was already mentioned, I think it was 2001 that the then city council actually approved a 9-year TIF agreement and new TIF district for this pretty much exact same project. That was about $887,000. At the time, that was being driven by a large outstanding special assessment. that was on the property, and the fees were discussed as well as part of that, has been mentioned already tonight at one point. That was all done. The approvals were there. The agreement was done. Everything was put in place. But after that was done, Scannell determined the project couldn't move forward just because of market conditions at that time, and basically put it on the shelf. And so what was indicated at that point to them was that if that ever came back and there was another tax increment request, they would need to start over that whole process. And that's effectively where we are today. They've came back and said they think that they can make the project work, but they still have some of the same economic challenges and wanted to make the same request that they had in place from the last time around, which was for 9 years of tax increment, which today, when we project that out, it's about $823,000 of present value, and so that's where we're at. There isn't a district here today because it was never actually certified. So because the project didn't move forward, even though the council approved it and everything had been done procedurally, it never went to the formal step of actually, which is an administrative step of actually sending it to the county and letting them know and letting the Office of State Auditor know and the state know that a district has been created because the project didn't move forward. So there isn't a district there today for that reason, and so that's the reason why they would need to come back and do this all over again. Just very briefly, so they were asked to reapply, just as they had in the past, which requires them to submit all their information to the staff indicating why they need the assistance for this particular project. And as you may recall from when we discussed the Parkway Neighborhood Apartments, what then happens is that goes through an analysis we call a pro forma analysis. So we're looking at the numbers that they submit, trying to determine, one, what they're representing consistent with what the market it would be representing at this point, are all the costs, the price of land acquisition, the fees they're charging, their financing assumptions, and their return on investment, all consistent with what market expectations would be. And then ultimately, we're looking at all the revenues and expenditures and what their debt service looks like relative to their return on investment, and do they need assistance? And just so very briefly, when we looked at that, everything is very similar to what it had been previously. Costs, of course, are a little different. So what they're representing today is consistent with what we think we would see in the industry for those from that perspective. Their proposed rents, this is a spec property, so we're needing to use rent levels that are unknown at this time, but consistent with what the market is currently showing. We actually looked at what higher rents might mean for the project, if they were able to achieve those. And even when we do that, we concluded that the project does require assistance or meets that test for, justifying assistance for the project, but concluded that 8 years at $740,000 was more reasonable to get them to a return on investment that's market rate. And so what that analysis showed is just really one simple thing, is that if you choose to look at providing assistance for this project, does it meet that statutory but-for test, which just means, this project wouldn't happen but for the TIF assistance. And that's all that analysis is saying. It isn't a recommendation, of course, to do the funding, and it still does require a policy decision from you all about whether you actually want to do that, and that is completely, obviously, within your discretion. But the information in that analysis is really just intended to give you that comfort level that you're meeting what is required of you statutorily to be able to provide that kind of assistance. Make sense to everyone before I move on from that? Okay, so what for this evening, what we tend to try to do here is, not knowing the level of support here, is that what's in front of you is a term sheet. And what all that is a non-binding agreement which outlines the terms of a potential formal final TIF agreement. And the idea is that it would gauge support from you all about whether you want to ultimately create a new district and enter into an agreement to provide tax increment financing for this project. And that's really kind of what it's there for. So it is non-binding, but what it does do is you've all voted on your position on providing tax increment for the project, and it allows us then to move forward with the next steps, which mean creating a tax increment district and drafting a TIF agreement. So there are some costs to do that, and both for the TIF district itself and then legal costs to draft that agreement. So we're trying to make sure there's support before incurring those costs. The developer ultimately will cover those costs, but but we're just trying to make sure that before we go down that road that there's support or not. So, and then if there isn't, if there's a no vote on the term sheet, then TIF simply will no longer be pursued, and that'll be the end of the conversation with then minimal investment into this process. So just a little bit of what the term sheet says is that's in there is that the developer will construct the project as approved by December 31st of 2026. So there's a timeline in there as there was previously. All of this is pretty much verbatim except for the timing and the amounts from the old agreement. The city would create that new tax increment district and provide up to $740,000, which current estimate shows about 8 years. Again, this is on a pay-as-you-go basis, so if you recall, what that means is that the city's not obligated to put any money up front, and if there's not enough money to repay from the district itself, the city doesn't make up any of the difference. So, and then with that, then you would retain also 10% of the increment and pay 90% out ultimately on the note that gets issued. I mentioned this already, but the developer will pay for its costs of the creation of the district, the agreement, and any other third-party costs that you might incur. So that part of the term sheet actually is binding, and they would need to do that. And then there are some other provisions in here that are, these were in the old agreement, and partially there because of the fact that this parcel, one of the parcels here, had been in the Green Acres tax deferral program. So what that is it's a program that ag properties can apply to that will defer their tax burden when they're in areas being pressured by development. And so there are several properties in Dayton that meet that criteria, including this one. And there is a rule with tax increment that if a property had been in one of those situations within the last 5 years, you need to follow a certain set of rules. And really what that means is that it can only then, TIF can only be used for a property that's solely for manufacturing and warehouse distribution purposes, and that the tenants, all of them that ultimately lease in this property, have to pay 90% or more of their employees at a rate equal or greater to than 160% of the federal minimum wage for everybody over the age of 20. So that's just straight out of the statute. So we have to follow that rule because of the fact that this was in Green Acres. And so the term sheet reflects that and talks about the fact that they need to also create those jobs at those wage levels and provide documentation to that effect for the time that this thing is being paid out in the district. So that's one of the last provisions there. And then just in terms of next steps, so if you decide to approve the term sheet, what we would then do is work with staff and legal counsel to do, one, create a new tax increment district, and two, draft a TIF agreement, which would govern how the TIF is delivered to the developer from that TIF district. There are some processes associated with that. That starts by notifying the other jurisdictions that a district is being considered, but ultimately will end up back here where you will be asked to hold a public hearing and consider approval of that tax increment district, and then also then asked to consider approval of a TIF agreement. And all of that can generally happen within 60 to 90 days depending on how fast we need to move. So with that, I'll stop, but certainly happy to answer any questions that you have.
I have two questions.
Sure.
One, the special assessments, is that the, so I am in Green Acres. I know very well how the program works. If I were to sell and the people who bought it did not reapply to Green Acres, they'd have to pay back the last 2 years of taxes.
That's right.
The deferred taxes.
Yep.
Is that the special assessment that they are talking about?
It is not. There was
Okay, what is the special assessment that they're talking about?
Well, Mayor, members of the council, it was about a $988,000 special assessment that was placed years ago, and I don't exactly remember what it was for.
Yeah, Mayor, members of the council, it was related to the Wicked Industrial area for water and sewer services at that time. It was about a $460-something thousand assessment at that time. The owner put it into deferral immediately. Putting in deferral does not mean you don't pay it. It just means that you don't have to pay it right away, but interest is earned on that every single year when you don't pay it. So it accumulated roughly $500,000 of interest over the next number of years. Was it about 15 to 20?
2006 or 7.
2006 or 7 to 2021, so about 14 years of interest on top of $465,000 roughly. And that's where the assessment came from.
And they knew this when they bought the property?
They did, yep.
Okay.
When Skinnell purchased the property, they were aware of that
Fully
assessment.
aware that this bill was sitting there?
Yes, that was their original TIF request.
And
that
they
came into play.
could have also chosen to pay it off right then and there and not accrue any more interest. but they also chose to let it sit there and accrue interest.
Skinnell paid the assessment when they purchased the property.
Okay, so that's already been paid, so
It has been
that
paid.
has not ongoing, okay.
It is not ongoing.
They just would like to make up that money that someone else didn't do.
That is what the TIF request was back in 2021, 22?
21, yeah.
Okay.
And
That
the number, that assessment number is in the costs that the developer submitted for all the analysis that I mentioned, but it's not inflated beyond the amount that they paid back in 2021. So I mean, arguably, we could have even allowed for some, holding costs associated, but we didn't, that's not included, so
Okay.
just FYI.
Okay, and then my second question had to do with the 160% of federal minimum wage. Zach and I had a conversation about what did that mean? Because as a math teacher, 160% of federal minimum wage, which is federal minimum wage is $7.25 per hour. 160% of that is $11.60. Zach's interpretation was that it was 160% on top of the $7.25, which then puts it up to $18.85. And so what does 160% of federal minimum wage mean?
Well, Mayor Members of the Council, I think it means the $11 something,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah, so $11.60,
Yeah.
which is barely above our own minimum wage in this state.
But it's not a high bar.
No, it's a very low bar.
Right.
So, I'm not inclined.
Even the other way is
Well, yeah, it's
gonna
not.
get any workers.
No. I'm not inclined to offer TIF for this. I don't see the benefit to the city personally for doing this. But
I'm down there at Tulsa. There's no benefit.
yeah, a bunch of minimum wage jobs.
Right.
Well, a bunch,
Not
20
even-
minimum wage
Not
jobs.
even minimum.
Yeah.
I mean, terrible.
Yeah.
You'll die first.
Jason, the yield on cost, what,
Oh, and they're still making money. It's just that they're not making as much money as they'd like.
what sets that? Because back then, the yield on cost goal was 6% and now it's 7%. So is that simply what the market is doing with these properties, or what drives that?
Yeah, Mayor, Members of the Council, that's exactly what it is. The market is just demanding a higher return today than it did then, and that's true across all kind of asset classes. We went through this with the housing, same thing there. We were in the 6s and even sometimes below. Today, that's entirely different. It's 7.5, 7 is what the investors are demanding.
I mean, I would like my investments to pay me that. I don't get to go to the government and ask for some tax abatement because my retirement investment isn't panning out where I'd like it to be.
What were you gonna say? I thought you were just gonna say something.
No,
You
there's
guys have
something
any?
similar to that, but my company doesn't get TIF either. Either you make it on your own or you.
I guess where I'm a little bit confused in the thing is that I was here in 2021, and I think the discussion was built around, the logic for the TIF was around that original assessment was probably unreasonable.
Yes.
And
That's exactly
put a
what it was.
burden on the original owner. Now, that's not the same person anymore, right? Skinnell is closed on the property somewhere along the line, and so they're the owner. They, I'm sure, assumed that this TIF would exist, in the purchase. Now, did they pay the owner a market rate and not, and sort of absolve him from that, and now they sort of overpaid because they paid that assessment plus all the interest that was accrued on it. I'm a little bit lost on who we're making whole now, because it's not the original guy. He got his money.
Yep.
And so now it's Skinnell trying to recover what they paid in good faith, because we did approve the TIF back then, based on that they were expecting that they would recover those extra funds. But the community doesn't get much out of this. We were, I think, ultimately just acknowledging that probably wasn't a reasonable special assessment in the first place. I'm not getting myself anywhere on this one, because I don't know what the right answer is. It seems like in general, when we do TIF, we the city get something for this. This is more of a forgiveness of something that we believe we didn't do right. And I don't know. I don't know where I'm gonna land on this one. That's my conundrum anyway, is that the city doesn't really benefit from this. But we are kind of pulling the rug out on them because we approved it before.
We did, but, that was then.
Also, technically, this is at 6.4%, which would not have met your bar before. It would have been too high.
And that was, where I was going with it it would have met that bar. That was my hang-up. One of my hang-ups. I think that the original assessment, what you stated is exactly what it was, is we were almost trying to fix a previous wrong. But I don't know that that's still the case. Obviously, it would be more lucrative if it would end up costing the city probably about 300 or so, 300K over the 8 years, give or take.
Mayor, the city's portion of the taxes, that kind of, I think it's about 34% of the total, something like that, yeah. So maybe a little less than that.
Is this project contributing anything toward the stoplight at that intersection?
They are not.
And
Sorry, Mayor, members of council.
They don't want to, or there's a reason why we're not asking for that?
I don't think we've asked.
I don't believe we asked that. So
This
the answer
does tie
is-
right to that same intersection.
It does, yes.
So you could argue that's how we've made up for it. That by not asking for them to chip in on that improvement to the intersection, that is kind of making whole the fact that they overpaid for the previous assessment.
Right, or...
Yeah, I believe the reason why staff didn't ask, at least in my perspective, was that they were already requesting TIF, so if we would ask them for more money, would they just ask us for more TIF back?
Yeah.
Again, not saying that was the only reason, but.
I guess I was under the impression that assessment was still hanging out over this thing, and it had accrued even since then, but
it's unpaid.
It was paid back then.
Stephanie?
I just don't see a benefit to the city, so.
Yeah,
Well, there's room for one. I mean, we're talking about a stoplight for that intersection. I mean, can the TIF be contingent on a contribution toward that improvement?
I don't know if that would meet the but-for test.
Well, Mayor, members of the council, I would say that the project already meets that test. If you were to layer more costs onto it, that's only going to make that more easily justifiable. So it just depends on what the corresponding amount of increment would be that goes along with it. If it's no more increment and you're adding project cost, then that makes that return metric worse.
That would,
yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Just solid no.
Solid no.
No.
Solid no. I think I'm a no.
All right.
You don't have to stand out.
Well,
All right.
I'm fine with saying no. I think the original problem isn't there anymore, and they should have built when they had the approval. But I'm not seeing the city benefit, and that's a problem.
Do we need to make a formal motion?
Nope.
Okay.
It just falls on the ground.
Yep.
Am I going to have the opportunity to speak?
Come on up.
Jason, you're good. Thank you. You're good.
Mr. Mayor, council members, staff, thanks for your time. Scott Moe, 9857 Aquila Road, Bloomington. Lots of benefit to the city. First of all, we're going to pay over $1 million in fees, as you heard from previous applicants. Your fees are about 3 to 4 times higher than anywhere else we deal in the cities. We're the largest developer in the Twin Cities. We have parks all over, in every quadrant of the Twin Cities, so we're pretty familiar with it. But you're going to garner over $1 million in fees from us starting there. Plus, we're going to build a building that's going to attract businesses to your community. Without somewhere to house them, they have nowhere to go, because not everybody could just go build their own building. So we're going to attract, multiple businesses to your community that are going to pay taxes, and we're going to pay real estate taxes. So I mean it respectfully. I think you're being very short-sighted on that issue. Secondly, we went ahead in good faith and bought that property and paid that really unreasonable assessment that you guys are already hinting on, with the understanding we're going to get TIF, which we got unanimously approved by the previous council and mayor, and support from Tina before she left. So we went ahead in good faith on that issue because it was, by everybody's understanding, pretty heavy-handed, and we went ahead with it. So I would ask you guys to consider honoring that agreement that was done before. And secondly, again, understand there's a tremendous benefit to the community. It's going to pay a lot of real estate taxes. The companies that come there are going to pay taxes. You're going to generate jobs. We're going to pay over $1 million in fees. The reason you hire somebody like Mr. Ehlers, Mr. Arsvold with Ehlers, is to make sure that you're getting a good, fair market assessment on it. And the fact of the matter is, we're not going to build this building without TIF. That's that simple. So it'll sit there and not generate job opportunities for your community, tax base, $1 million in fees or whatever. It's just, that's why you hire him, is to assess, do we actually need it? Why do we need it? Because of that very heavy-handed assessment. Pretty simple. So I'd ask you to consider honoring the previous agreement, and also understand there's tremendous benefit to the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I mean, you're still getting a 6.4% rate of return, and that's
Without it.
without it.
It's either 7.1 with? or-
Yeah, and 6.4.
Well, you're not in the business to make that decision on what's a reasonable return. That's why you hired him to assess it, and his professional opinion is it doesn't meet market standards. So, I mean, respectfully, it's not up to you to decide what we're supposed to make or not. There's a reasonable spread that the market generates for the risk we're taking, which on a speculative development is significant risk. We could sit empty in that building for years.
So then the city would be making the money that you just said we'd be making.
Well,
And we
but
would have
we'll
the
pay
jobs
you the
that you
fees,
said
and
we
you'll
would.
eventually get your taxes, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a risk involved with it. We're in a high-risk, high-reward business, and right now the reward is very skinny. The spread between what our return on cost is a deal is very narrow. Nobody's going to feel sorry for us. We don't expect you to. But you hired a professional to assess, does it make sense to have TIF? And he very firmly told you yes. So I would ask you to rely on that. That's why you did it, and not bring your personal opinions into what you think returns ought to be for professional developers. I don't think that's fair.
All right,
Thank you.
Anything else?
Nope.
No questions?
thank you. Any changed?
No.
Nope.
Nope. Nope. Okay. All right. On to Jay.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A little background on the project we're talking about, which is the mill and overlay of 125th and East French Lake Road. The city's pavement management plan identifies several pavement or surface improvement projects on roads throughout the city for 2026. As you're all aware, the South Diamond Lake Road project that was recently bid, the bids came in very low, about 36% under what we anticipated them to come in at. So due to that, the consideration is being made to move some of the improvements from the 2026 timeframe up to 2025. So the ones we're looking at doing, as mentioned, is East French Lake Road and 125th, all the way from Territorial Road, all the way out to Fernbrook Lane. City staff has also made the decision to add Stonehearth Ridge neighborhood, which is on 125th nearer to Fernbrook Lane, just due to the pavement condition on there and then the convenience of proximity of the work.
Is that the ad that's going to cause, is that pretty linear?
Yeah, it's very small area-wise.
Yep.
I don't have that number separated out, but
There's no
just on
other way
the-
to make the project more efficient than doing it with this project, just because it's such a small neighborhood that if you added it to another project, the mobilization cost alone would be more than what the project would cost if you added it to this one. So.
I haven't driven that road. Is that road in pretty tough shape?
It's similar to 125th.
It wasn't on our list, right?
It was not on the list. It's a pretty short segment. There's some settlements around some catch basins on there, and there's some distresses on there. It could use some attention, certainly. And then just to note, there is some culvert work. We did go out and look at the culverts. There's a couple that should be replaced with this project before we put new pavement down. And then again, some of the storm sewer and manholes within that development need some attention. It's pretty minor work, but a little bit more than just the mill and overlay portion. And then just to note, this is, as can be expected, coming out of the city's pavement management fund. So just a graphic of it. And again, you can see just in length of road, the Stonehearth Ridge is very small in comparison to the overall project. So estimated project cost for this, we're thinking around $970,000 for construction, and then another 70 or so for engineering and other indirect costs that would be associated with it, for right around $1 million for the costs. And then just for comparison and note, I just added the South Diamond Lake Road estimate on what we started at with the 1.3, and the bids came in at just over 800. So a significant reduction to what we anticipated for that one originally. Schedule on this, ideally we do get it bid and constructed this year, so we would like to come back the second meeting in July with plans and move forward as indicated here with the bid opening early August, award late August, and then start construction in September. That is aggressive, and there is more field work to be done with this in preparation. So we did identify a fallback date. We are of the belief that if the fallback date is what it becomes, that we can still construct it this year. So just to note that. And then additionally, I think council is aware of this, that if either we don't meet the schedule or we do move forward with bids and for some reason they're excessively high compared to what we're expecting, we can just rebid it in the spring. We can reject all bids and rebid in the spring. So it wouldn't be lost cost, if you will, for the preparation of plans and specifications this year. So our recommendation is to approve the engineering proposal included in your packet, and that would be authorization to prepare the plans and specifications.
I like it. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
There's a question in the
Go.
audience.
Isn't there a housing development going up off of East French Lake Road just north of Territorial?
Yes.
So would you do the roads after they were done with the housing development then?
This would be before
Because
that.
you'll have a lot of heavy equipment.
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually the newest section of the road too, because that was redone with Territorial Trail in there. But timing of the projects, they wouldn't be done through there for probably a full year.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no. Carries 5-0. And we are on to
Revised item K. Apologize about
Revised.
this, council. Yeah, so I advised item K at the beginning of the agenda. We essentially added in the personal policy, which I didn't have time to update the PowerPoint, obviously, to get more information. We just realized that this was not added. It was tabled, waiting for a legal opinion. and we have legal opinion tonight. It was not added to the agenda, so. We, at the last council meeting, we discussed at length with the personnel policy and conversations, questions related to some of the new terminology related to the additions related to the personnel policy. With Amy being our legal counsel, she's the one who drafted most of this and worked with staff. Overall, I do have one change that we had mentioned last time already, that we want to remove the random testing portion of that, which is certainly fine. And then we had a clarification or question on what the return to work testing meant. Do you want to clarify what that actually meant, which was what Councilmember Van Assen had mentioned, which is only if you are on leave for a certain instance related to a violation, related to whether that's alcohol or drugs, then you would be tested when you came back. If you just returned to work after a leave of absence or a vacation, then you would not be subject to that return to work testing. So that's how it is written and how it should be intended to be implied.
So if you were on leave because of alcohol or
Yeah, so if you were put on a leave of absence based on
due to those
things, because you need to find rehab help or you need to do something else, then you would be essentially required to, subject to return to work testing.
But
If you take a leave of absence to take care of your sick grandma, that's not going to count for return to work testing.
Or just go on vacation.
Or just vacation or whatever that may be.
Or your own FMLA, or your
You got
own anything.
Yep. To work on your mental health, whatever that may be, then you are not subject to return to work testing. And then clarification on why the public safety employees was required to be, that was the last question we had, was why are public safety employees essentially no ever, and that is based on boards and how they're federal guidelined. So with police, it's post board. For firefighters, it is the EMSRB, or is it the OEMS, or based on that board. With being an EMR, EMT, EMS professional, you need to follow those federal guidelines, which are run by the state boards. So that is why those individuals are required to be following federal guidelines for their positions.
And those federal guidelines mandate no
Correct, because it follows the federal allowance of cannabis. Now, if the federal allowance of cannabis happens at some point in the whatever future, then we would have to revisit our personal policy, because then it would be change in the statute or whatever you want to call it.
Because the federal law doesn't recognize
Correct.
cannabis as illegal. It's still categorized as a drug.
That's correct.
As an illegal substance.
That is correct. So that is why those public safety employees are required to be essentially nothing ever.
I'm sure about that.
But again, I'm here for questions and responses. I know that was at the last council meeting, so I'm trying to do it so we have some sort of recollection of what it was discussed. And I know that Councilmember Fashion wasn't here either for the conversation and may have more questions based on it too.
Yeah, I did watch the meeting after I got back, so I feel like I'm more or less up to speed. It doesn't solve it for me. I mean, it seems like there's a conundrum there, particularly with the THC, with the amount of time it stays in your system, and particularly with the firefighters, where they're essentially on call all the time. So it seems like seems to overreach, but I don't know how you solve that exactly until there's some point in time where there's, a pot allows it or something. Maybe, you blow past a certain level and it means something. Now I don't know that it can mean anything. Does it mean that you used or drank something yesterday or 29 days ago? And if it's 29 days ago, how is that relevant to something that happened yesterday? So that's where I get stuck with it. Is I don't know how you.
There's one state that I found that did set a level. I don't remember what the state was, but it set it to like 7 nanograms of blah blah blah.
I'm gonna look at the city attorney, so I have no idea.
I'm just
That's
saying,
a good guess.
because they're the
familiar
first
with
ones, I mean, they were one of the first ones to legalize it, so I'm guessing their cities have gone through this already. So what have they done?
Yeah, I really don't like the fact that it can reach back so far. I just do not like that, but
It's just a product of the fact that the state law and the federal law don't align.
Sync.
My 2 cents is I'm gonna take those two's recommendation, otherwise we're gonna beat this to death for 45 minutes and still not find a solution.
Well, and one thing to keep in mind is that you're not it's not the council's intention, as I understand it, to do random testing.
No, not at all.
So, the only time that the personnel policy would be triggered in effect is if somebody is on the job impaired by it and test positive.
But what does
So if they
impairment
smoke
look like?
Yeah,
You had too many
that's-
snacks, you giggled too much in the truck. That's where I have
Exactly,
a problem, is
but it-
impairment doesn't,
But-
it's not like alcohol where you're slurring your words and you're stumbling around. Like, I just don't.
Well, that's where you have, law enforcement who have some training in drug recognition, so you have some expertise in-house, as far as that goes. So it's, the way I would envision it happening is that, a supervisor sees somebody behaving in a certain way, kind of is suspicious that maybe they're impaired by something. You call a police officer from your staff, they come and they do, their assessment, and then you kind of go from there. So getting to the point where you're testing your employees for cannabis is pretty far down the process, down the steps of the process. So it's just, the policy as it's written is pretty consistent with what other Minnesota cities are doing to, who all are also struggling with the same, discrepancy between the state law and the federal law. And, it really comes down to the fact that since you're not going to just be randomly saying, I'm going to test you today, it really comes down to whether there's an impairment that's visible that makes them unsafe on the job.
I can remember years ago, I probably would have fallen off the truck.
Thanks, Scott.
Years ago.
Years.
When you would get into that.
We're talking a long time ago, but.
Statute of limitations.
I mean, with the clarification, okay, with taking out the random testing, which I absolutely want to take out random testing, and with the clarification that the testing after leave is only if it is a leave directly related to an issue, I am kind of with, we have a federal law, state law that are not matching, and we're not there yet, and I think we have to go with what the federal law is, basically. I mean, I think that's where we're at, and I don't.
Is that where you're at?
I think that's where I have to land. I think there's a disconnect there that doesn't make sense to me, but it's above us again, and
testing hasn't caught up.
Right, it has not, because even without the random piece, so I'll use fire. Somebody is involved in an incident in fire, and maybe Gary, you can help with this, but so something goes bad, right? Somebody sues the city. That's our concern, is that we've got liability with impaired personnel on these events. So something goes bad, and the city gets sued, and they want. Does that drive this testing, or is it more? Somebody who was on the crew said, this character clearly was not fit to be here, and the lawyers get wind of that, they ask for the testing. I mean, how does this kind of play out in a real way?
I think, Councilman Fichon, from my perspective, that you have a couple things. One being, if somebody was hurt, let's say they get hurt on the job, I think that would constitute testing, just in that capacity. If they hurt somebody else inadvertently, then liability. I guess the question that I have, that I talked to Zach a little bit about today, is that with this, we don't know if somebody's using THC. To your point, is it 2 days ago, 30 days ago? What does that liability look like? I don't know. I'd have to ask Amy, in that capacity, what that looks like. But my assumption is an attorney is going to get involved. If we do have an accident, we should be drug testing anyways, from that perspective. Say somebody gets into a car accident or a fire truck runs into something, that would constitute testing. At a minimum, I would, from that perspective. But I think reality is that if we had somebody today, because we're not doing randoms, which is fine, having THC in their system, another attorney is going to get involved, or we're going to get into some sort of conundrum with the other attorney because they want to basically prove liability back to us, having deeper pockets at the end of the day. So I think the best thing to do, from my perspective, is Scott is looking for some opinion, I guess, is that we mirror basically what other cities do. We're covering our butts in that capacity of, same or similar until some other type of testing comes out.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't think we can fix this. I think we have to live with what it is until there is
Until it gets fixed.
a better answer.
Were those the only outstanding issues?
Those are the only ones that I noted at the last council meeting. If anybody else can remember any, please let me know, but those are the ones I remember having big hangups on. If we don't know what this means.
Yeah.
We don't know what that means. Why do we have this for public safety employees?
And so there's not automatic testing. Let's say an accident occurs. There's not automatic testing there. It's got to be a suspicion of impairment.
It would be on an accident would be automatic, yes.
Oh.
So that's where, like, we had the incident happened. Say we had a public works employee hit something.
Yep.
Another public works employee's car. That never happens, right? We would then that would be then considered a accident on the scene, and they would have to go get tested.
Which would be new, right?
That would be new, yes.
Because we don't do that now.
Because we don't have a policy.
We do not have a policy.
You can't test someone unless you have a policy.
Yeah.
No, I'm just asking. It was just a
So
clarification.
essentially, it's just and that doesn't necessarily mean that means a punishment for the employee. That might mean that employee might need help, and that it honestly leaves us with an ability to help that employee more than just saying, "Oh yeah, that's just sucks and it's too bad," because that employee might need help with something else.
Yeah, I get that. It's just not my experience that they help.
Yep. I'm not trying to say anything about what's happened in the past. I'm trying to say that this is what my version of what I'm.
Okay. Well, let's. So where were we at with this? We need a
motion, right?
A motion
I'll
to.
make a motion to approve it as it's written.
No, not
Minus
as written.
random testing.
We have to take out the random testing.
They already did that.
But that's not as written, is it?
Technically, I put it in there as the same as
Okay.
last time, so it needs to be. You need the motion to remove random testing if that's what we know. I noted that in the comments that we wanted to have random testing.
The changes that you were going to make.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying.
Yes.
So not as written, but with the changes identified.
Yes. Changes identified, which is the only one I have right now is removing random testing. That's what I have.
Did Stephanie and Mayor, did you want to remove the testing after an accident?
No, I'm going to vote no matter what, so
Okay.
don't ask me.
I'm not sure I like that. Yeah. But. Do you care?
Does that cause
What's that?
us legal issues if we take that out?
I don't think it does, because let's say somebody screwed up, they get in an accident, whether we test them or not, we're liable.
True. I mean, it's simply, it's just a protection that allows the city to take action from an employment perspective, separate from any, other external legal liability. This is primarily an inward-looking policy. It's about how you deal with your employees, not always about how they're interacting with the public, if that makes sense.
Yep. So what you're asking, I think what you're getting at is if a guy backs a truck into a parking lot, he backs a truck into another vehicle. Right now, if you leave it the way it is, you can randomly test him, or you could test him for that.
No.
No. Well, if you adopt the policy with the changes,
Then they
yes. But as we sit today, without this new policy update, we can't do anything.
So I would say because it was pouring rain Thursday or so ago, when I backed into the dumpster at Northern Hydraulics, if it happens one time, I just wasn't paying attention. That's just the way it was. I would not want the
It doesn't mean that we have to test them. It means that we have the ability to.
But we would.
Yeah,
But you would, because you have a
possibly
policy that
would.
says you're going
The
to.
only reason you would is that you want to get rid of that guy, which, to me, it would have to be a common occurrence, or it'd have to happen 3 times or something, not on a single deal. So, I mean, to me, if you're going to have that in there, there's got to be multiple issues.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we currently in the police department have a drug policy in place, and it requires on any personal injury accident that we do testing, or any critical incident that we test. Property damage accidents, if we show up and we have reasonable suspicion that the officer is under the influence, we would definitely test then also. But a lot of it is your personal injury accidents where an injury is caused because of the civil lawsuits that come from those accidents. So I would request that you keep at least personal injury accidents in the policy for mandatory testing.
I could see that.
I could live with that.
Does that?
Post-accident testing is related to 3 things. The accident involved a fatality, the driver receives a citation for a moving violation from an accident, and an injury is treated away from the accident scene for either party, or the driver receives a citation and the vehicle has to be towed from the accident scene. That's what I read in the post-accident testing area.
What page is that on? Sorry.
Oh,
This was.
it's currently page 39. It may not be that after we make adjustments.
It just, that way I can look at it.
And I would recommend to go with what is in the policy.
Would that happen, Paul, either way, just for a police officer, no matter what, or you probably?
You're already covered, is what you're asking, right?
In the police side of it, you're already covered. That's already done, right?
You already.
My policy's already completed. I've had that policy in place for years.
Okay.
Are there
Maybe I could see
similar
that policy
requirements for people with a CDL? Are
Not
there
that I want to
similar
change it, but it would
requirements
be
for
good to
people that
kind
have
of
a
make sure that
CDL?
they
There are
match up.
I think they
more
are.
requirements for people who have CDL than there are for just a general person.
Don't some of the public works
Yes.
employees have to have a CDL
all
to
of
drive
them.
the plow trucks and?
All of them do.
And so it's not, so rereading the policy, the testing after an accident isn't just I backed in
Right.
to a dumpster. It is because someone died, or because there was an injury that had to be treated, not just I went home and was like, oh, my back is sore. But you went to the hospital, or your vehicle was towed from the scene, which has to be a pretty bad accident to get towed away, typically. So I'm actually okay, because there are those, it's not just I backed into the garbage can.
Yeah, I was using that as an example.
Yeah.
but I mean,
Bad
So
example.
I'll make it with that change right there.
Okay.
it's not a change.
It's not a change, that's what it
Okay.
was, that's what it
That's
was.
fine.
So we're
I
back
can live with
to
that.
Taking out random
just
testing,
taking our random testing.
and we have clarified what return from leave is.
Got a motion from Scott.
I will second it with those changes.
Any more discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
Passes 3-2.
All right.
Okay, I hate to do this, but I need another break.
I have to use the restroom if we're
We,
gonna keep going.
so I could just, I'll ask just a quick question. Do we want to have a budget discussion tonight? We do not have to. I didn't have to prepare anything for
Oh,
this.
well then, boom.
It's up to the council if you want to have a discussion tonight.
I'm cool with skipping this.
I'm sending you a text on where I'm at.
Well, oh, yeah.
If you want to send me something after this, that's great. I'm good with not having any conversation, depending on what the council wants.
Yeah.
We will have further conversation, and
We
I'm
will.
ready to have it if you want to, but I don't know if anybody's prepared.
I mean,
You want to, how about this? Can you please send me your thoughts
Yes.
on it
Yes.
within
Yes.
the week?
Yes.
So from everybody,
Okay.
you need a response of percentages, dollars, whatever you want to say, something to me. Tax rate, whatever, it'd be great.
Something.
Something to me.
Anything.
Like, yeah, something about the levy or
Oh.
something.
Yeah, the levy. Oh,
Anything about the levy.
okay, so
That's all. Direction.
if there are no
We outta
objections, we'll be adjourned. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.